Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto Used Asuna for His Harem Pleasure. So do 4 blue hearts comment, be sure to subscribe. Be to our channel and like this video and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Naruto X Rias and Akino uncensored spicy version, link in description. When Naruto Uzumaki first opened his eyes his mind was foggy and his memory spotty. The last thing he had a clear recognition of was Madara Uchiha standing over him as Kurama was pulled out of him. As he tried to land one final blow to the revived Uchiha using his father's Hiraishin Jutsu. After that it was all a blank for the blonde shinobi. What had happened to the war? Were his friends safe? Trying to contact Kurama within the seal proved impossible and the Uzumaki feared that Madara had succeeded in extracting the Biju. Picking himself up from where he was laying, Naruto noticed that he was lying in some alley. Walking out of the alley, Naruto looked around hoping to see something or find someone who could tell him where he was and what happened to the Fourth Shinobi World War. Ellipsis. It wasn't long before Naruto lost track of time and realized that he was stuck in a world that he didn't understand. The people seemed to be stuck in some sort of genjutsu, always following the same path and giving him limited responses to anything he asked them. At first he feared that Madara had won and had accomplished his Moon Eye plan, trapping him in an eternal illusion, but quickly discarded that idea for a couple of reasons. First, he couldn't sense any chakra from those people, and secondly, he couldn't draw in any nature chakra. When he exited the city, which he learned was called the Town of Beginning, a city within the flying castle, Aincard, a little bit of information that he was able to obtain by looking around that he actually found useful. He was attacked by boars and wolfsta. He would burst into specks of light only to come back to life later. What really caught the blonde shinobi off guard was when a screen appeared right in front of him from nothing saying he obtained a WOLF pelt and some call after defeating one of the wolves. From there Naruto learned little more of the world he found himself in. By swiping his right hand downward, another screen appeared with many different options. After that he learned about the world he found himself in. It was a world of swords, the world of Sword Art Online. Then after nearly a month something finally changed, players started to appear within Aincard. November 6, 2022, Town of Beginning. Since the first player logged in, Naruto watched the players interact and immerse themselves within the game, completely out of sight from them. The blonde shinobi was happy about the player's appearance in the game as it meant that he would finally have human contact, or at least close to it, after nearly a month of being alone with the exception of NPCs. At first the player's excitement was almost contagious and Naruto found himself more enthusiastic than he had been since before the war. That excitement was short-lived when Naruto and the players learned one horrifying fact about the game. As the sun began to set on the first day of the game, a bell started to ring that could be heard for miles as Naruto noticed all the players' start to disappear in small pillars of blue light. It didn't take long for the shinobi to locate the missing players, all gathered in the city's central plaza looking as confused as he felt from the sudden turn of events. Naruto decided to watch from the shadows to figure out what was happening. He didn't need to wait long. Above the plaza the sky turned red with panels that said, "Warning," and "System Announcement." From between the panels large amounts of what looked like blood poured out, but instead of falling to the ground it came together. Naruto watched in horrifying fascination as, from the blood, a large red-robed figure with its face completely obscured by a hood appeared. "Attention, players," the hooded figure said loudly and clearly for everyone to hear. "I welcome you to my world. My name is Akihiko Kayaba." The self-introduced Akihiko Kayaba revealed. "And as of this moment, I am in control of this world," he stated absolutely. While some of the players seemed to be in awe of the gamer creator's entrance, Naruto couldn't help the feeling of dread welling up inside of him that said something bad was about to happen. And after his childhood and his experience in the war, it was an instinct that Naruto trusted completely. Naruto doubted it would take long before he found out what the cause of the feeling was. Kayaba started speaking again after the players calmed down a little, making sure everyone's attention was on him. "I'm sure most of you have already noticed an item missing from your main menus, the logout button," Kayaba said, bringing up the screen in front of him, large enough for everyone to see, to show the spot where the button was supposed to be. "Let me assure you, this is not a defect in the game. I repeat, this is not a defect. This is how Sword Art Online was designed to be. The robbed figure declared. Naruto was honestly confused about what Kayaba was talking about. Of course, since it was Naruto's actual body in the game and not a virtual one like everyone else, he couldn't log in or out of the game like everyone else should have been able to. Which meant that even if the button had been there, it wouldn't have worked for him. Fly the last Uzumaki wondered what else differentiated between him and the others. You cannot log yourselves out of SAO, Kayaba continued, ignoring the whispers of disbelief from the players. And no one from the outside will be able to shut down or remove the nerve gear from your head. If anyone attempts to do so, a transmitter inside the nerve gear will discharge a microwave signal into your skull, destroying your brain and ending your life. The game designer said, to the horror of everyone. The horror the players felt at the news quickly turned to outrage, believing the game designer to be lying, and quickly tried to leave the plaza only to find out that they couldn't. The blonde shinobi didn't know enough about nerve gears to know if Kayaba was being honest or not, but from the looks of utter fear on some of the avatars' faces, that seemed to be the case. Next to Kayaba, screens appeared depicting the news of what was happening in the real world. Despite my warning, the families and friends of some of the players have attempted removing the nerve gear, an unfortunate decision, to say the least. As a result, the game now has 213 less players than when it began. Kayaba said, as Naruto's eyes drifted from one screen to another. One screen showed the profile of a player whose nerve gear was removed and died, another showed a family crying, another instructions by the government to not remove the nerve gear and contact proper authorities to transport the player to a hospital where they would be looked after until the situation was resolved. They've been deleted from both Aincard and the real world, Kayaba said dramatically. 213 dead in just a few hours, Naruto thought as he had flashbacks to the war, causing his hand to clench to the point his knuckles turned white. While nowhere near as bad as the casualties suffered in the Fourth Shinobi War, it was still 213 people whose lives were cut short because of one man. As you can see, Kayaba said, gesturing to the screens. International media outlets have round-the-clock coverage of everything, including the deaths. At this point, it's safe to assume the likelihood of a nerve gear being removed is minimal at best. The game creator explained, relieving the players slightly with the knowledge none of them would suddenly be dropping dead at any moment. I hope this brings you a little comfort as you try to clear the game. It's important to remember the following. There is no longer any way to revive someone within the game. If your HP drops to 0, your avatar will be deleted from the system forever. Kayaba said with finality to his words. And the nerve gear will destroy your brain. He added, causing the players to grow fearful once more. There is only one way for a player to escape now, you must clear the game. The robbed figure continued. As an outline of Aincard appeared beside him, the lowest part highlighted. Right now, you're gathered on floor 1, the lowest level of Aincard. If you can get through the dungeon and defeat the boss, you may advance to the next floor. Defeat the boss on floor 100, and you will clear the game. Kayaba explained, the image of Aincard showing a highlighted bar, going upward until reaching the very top. Some of the players were confused, most likely first-time gamers, while the ones who knew what Kayaba was talking about were outraged by how impossible the goal seemed. Once more ignoring the players' protests, Kayaba continued as if nothing was happening. Last but not least, I've placed a little present in the item storage of every player. Please have a look. Kayaba urged them. Out of sheer curiosity, Naruto checked his own item storage and was honestly surprised to find something there. Bringing it out, the blonde shinobi was confused when it turned out to be just a mirror. Seeing his confused face reflected off its surface, Naruto's eyes were quickly torn away from his reflection when he heard multiple shouts from the players ahead of him. Lookin' up, Naruto saw a bright light engulf the players before disappearing. The problem was they all looked different from what they did a second ago before the light overcame them. Most noticeable, and one that made Naruto want to vomit the most, was a female character that was dressed provocatively, was now an overly muscular guy in the same clothing. That is seriously messed up. Naruto thought his face actually a little green. What the hell is wrong with that guy? Why the hell would he dress like that? Putting the disturbing image out of his mind, Naruto focused chakra into his ears to Enhance his hearing, hoping that one of the players knew what happened and would explain what was going on. How? Naruto caught the end of a question asked by a male player. The scan, another male player. This one, sounding younger than the first, answered. There's a high-density signal device inside the nerve gear rig. It can see what my face looks like. The younger player realized. But how does it know my height and body type? He wondered. When you first put the nerve gear on, the older-sounding player began. It had to do this calibration thing. It asked you to touch your body all over like this, remember? He finished. So, Naruto thought, as he stopped channeling chakra into his ears. This is what they all really look like. Then it's a good thing I didn't sneak into the plaza. He decided. If he had, somebody might have realized that Naruto's appearance hadn't changed at all. Not to mention his clothes didn't exactly fit in with everyone else's. Naruto's attention was focused back on Kayaba when he began speaking again. Right now, you are probably wondering why. Why would Akihiko Kayaba, developer of Sword Art Online and Nerve Gear, do this? Ultimately, my goal was a simple one. The reason I created Sword Art Online was to control the fate of a world of my design. Kayaba, Naruto thought angrily, Kayaba's wish to act like some sort of god in a fake world, reminding Naruto too much of Madara Uchiha and his Moon Eye plan. The difference between them being that Madara reason also involved bringing peace to the world, as fake as it might be, while Kayaba didn't. To have such a wish was just acting selfishly. When only considering that Kayaba seemed the worse of the two. Then you consider everything else and Madara trumps Kayaba in a landslide. As you can see, I have achieved my goal. Kayaba stated. This marks the end of the tutorial and official launch of Sword Art Online. In that moment Naruto was seriously struggling to restrain himself from throwing a Rasenshuriken at Kayaba's robbed figure. But if he did that, he would end up revealing his presence inside the game, and then he would lose the element of Sir Rasenshuriken. He was Uzumaki fucking Naruto. Because Naruto fucking Uzumaki didn't sound as awesome, he didn't care if the enemy knew he was there. To him it just meant that they would know who was responsible for kicking their ass. I wish you the best of. Kayaba was cut off before he could finish by the appearance of a blue-white sphere with 4 curved blades coming out of it that was creating a screeching sound. The Rasenshuriken was blocked by a barrier that Kayaba had erected around his robbed avatar. Though the Rasenshuriken was blocked, the winds generated by the jutsu were enough to force everyone to instinctively close their eyes and hold up their arms to block the wind. From behind his barrier, Kayaba was astounded by the force of the attack, as even though it should be impossible, something happened that wasn't supposed to be possible within Sword Art Online. Not only did that sphere look like some sort of magic, but he could tell that the barrier was straining to hold it back. As it stood, he could see small tears were appearing in his robe. A part of the Sword Art Online creator wanted to stay back and investigate what the cause of the strange anomaly was, but ultimately decided to leave and investigate the matter later. The robbed figure started to collapse in on itself, as if nothing was holding it up anymore. As it disappeared into red-colored smoke and the sky returned to normal, Kayaba leaving behind confused, scared, and angry players and a lone shinobi. After Kayaba disappeared, Naruto didn't bother to stick around. If the man was serious about the only way to free everyone was to clear the game, then Naruto needed to hurry and figure out how this game was played. So that he could clear it, so that he could keep as many people from dying as possible. 1 month later. An entire month had passed since the beginning of Sao, and in that time 2,000 people had ended up falling victim to Akihiko Kayaba's death game. Though after a month of searching for the floor 1 boss's lair, the room had been rumored to be found, and a meeting was to be held to plan out how to beat the boss and finally clear the first floor. Arriving at the amphitheater where the meeting was being held, Naruto sat down and near the back just as it was starting, in a different set of clothes than his normal outfit that he arrived in. He had on a Anbu-style vest on over a long-sleeved orange shirt, black fingerless gloves, black pants, boots, and his Konoha headband tied around his waist acting like a belt buckle. Around his neck was the necklace that Tsunade gave him. Most of his clothes he had sealed away in a storage seal on his right arm, which now contained his normal clothes along with other items, with the exception of the shirt and boots. Naruto had a simple sword he obtained within the game strapped on his back, along with his kunai and shuriken pouch. In the months since the massive multiplayer online role-playing game, MMORPG, started, Naruto had managed to figure out how to play the game, mostly. There were still some things he needed to learn or things that still confused him. But at the very least it seemed like he was just a new player playing his first online game and not completely new to technology. Naruto focused back on the meeting when the person holding it began to speak. "Okay, people. Now that everyone's here, let's get this meeting started." The person that spoke was a male player with blue eyes and blue hair, with a couple of long bangs that framed each side of his face. Naruto had to suppress a snicker as the man's bangs reminded Naruto of Sasuke's hairstyle with the exception that the back of the man's head didn't look like a duck's ass. But with a bit of work it probably could. The man had bronze-colored armor on his chest, shoulders, arms, and shins with blue-colored clothes under his armor, white pants, and fingerless gloves. A sword was at his waist and a shield on his back. "So anyway," the man continued, "I want to thank everyone for coming, good to see you. My name is Diabell, and in this game, the job I rolled is knight," he loudly proclaimed, though his claim caused some of the other players to start laughing. "Dude, there's no job system in this game," another player pointed out among the many chuckles. "You guys want to hear this or not?" Diabell asked them, sounding annoyed. When the laughter died down, Diabell continued, "Right, anyway, here's the deal. Our party found the boss room at the top of the tower today," Diabell declared, capturing everyone's attention completely as he confirmed the rumors. "First, we need to defeat the boss and make it to floor 2. The next step is we have to tell everyone waiting in the town of beginning that it is possible to beat this game. Fact is, it's our duty as the most capable players here. Do you agree or not?" The blue-haired player questioned them. Naruto would honestly admit that he was slightly impressed by Diabell's speech, as it seemed to raise everyone else's spirits, as they started to cheer Diabell, and made them more confident about taking on the boss. "Okay," Diabell said with a pleased smile on his face, happy to hear such a positive reaction from everyone. "Glad to hear you're all with me on this. Now let's figure out how we're going to beat the boss. First off, we'll team up into parties of 6. A typical party doesn't stand a chance against a floor boss. We need a raid group made up of multiple parties." A mixed look of surprise and nervousness appeared on Naruto's face at the fact that he would have to join a party to be part of the raid group. For the last month Naruto had refrained from interacting with the trapped players as much as possible, essentially becoming what he came to recognize as a solo player, as he learned to play the game. Of course, with his jutsu and training, he didn't really need to rely on others to survive here as much as everyone else would. But if the boss really was stronger than normal monsters, then one of Kakashi's first lessons, to work as a team against stronger opponents, only made sense. Besides, Naruto was tired of being alone, being stuck in a virtual world in a dimension different from his own, without his friends or the knowledge if they were safe. Without Kurama, his oldest companion, who he was starting to form a true bond with, reminded him too much of his childhood, and he wanted to have some real, figuratively speaking, with only being virtual versions of themselves, friends again. Looking around, Naruto noticed that nearly everyone had already formed into their own parties. The only exceptions were a couple of other players besides himself who were near the back of the amphitheater and didn't seem to be with anyone. Naruto approached the closest one, a player that wore a dark red hooded cloak that hid most of their appearance from view. "Ah, you're not partying with anyone?" Naruto asked a bit awkwardly. "No," the person answered, in what Naruto thought was a feminine-sounding voice. "Everyone already seemed to know each other, so I stayed out of it," she explained. Briefly, Naruto wondered if she was a solo player like himself. "So, do you want to form a party with me?" the blonde shinobi asked her. "Since we can't be part of the raid group if we are on our own," he went on to explain when she seemed to turn to look at him. After a moment where she just looked at him, the cloaked player nodded her head the slightest bit. A uncertain voice said from beside them. Looking toward the source, they saw a slightly messy black-haired teen male with black eyes. He wore a dark blue long-sleeved shirt under a white vest, black pants and boots, and black fingerless gloves. He had a sword slung over his shoulder that fell down instead of across his back. "Can I join your party?" he asked uncertainly. Glance C. To his right to make sure it was alright. Naruto saw the cloaked girl nod her head slightly again to show she was okay with it. Turning back to face the boy, Naruto gave him one of his fox-like grins. Sure, the more the merrier, Naruto said, getting the boy to sigh in relief and give them a small smile in return before he blinked a couple of times in confusion. Have we met somewhere before? He asked, you sound kind of familiar. His own look of confusion appeared on Naruto's face at the black-haired teen's question. I don't think so, Naruto answered. Is that so? The dark-eyed boy mumbled, swearing that the blonde-haired teen's voice sounded familiar, before the boy sent Naruto and the cloaked girl an invite, which they both accepted. At the top left corner of his vision, Naruto saw W2 bars appear under a bar that had his name beside it, which he learned was what represented his HP. The new bars that appeared had two names beside them. Kirito, Asuna. Those were the names of his two new teammates. All right, Diabell said at that moment, drawing everyone's attention back to him. It looks like everyone's teamed up. Now then, hold up a sec, a new voice shouted, cutting Diabell off mid-sentence. From the very back of the amphitheater a man appeared, who made his way down to the stage by jumping on the stone seats. The man had sienna-colored hair, which reminded Naruto of a cactus for some reason. Goatee with brown-colored eyes. His clothes didn't stand out much with the exception of his gray-scale armor-plated vest. On his back was a one-handed sword. My name's Kibo, got that? Kibo said rudely as he introduced himself, turning his attention from Diabell to the gathered players. Before we take on the boss, I want to get something off my chest. Some of you here need to apologize to the 200 who have died so far. He finished, pointing towards the crowd. Kibo, Diabell said, drawing the man's attention to him. Are you perhaps referring to the beta testers? He asked. Of course I mean them. Kibo answered angrily. The day this stupid game started, the beta guys ditched us beginners and all disappeared. The cactus head accused. They took all the hunting spots and easy quests for themselves, so they alone could get stronger, and ignored the rest of us. Kibo said, looking back at the gathered players. Hell, I bet there are some of them here. He shouted, pointing at the crowd once more. They should get on their knees and apologize, and give up all the items and money that they've hoarded for themselves. Kibo demanded, otherwise, how can they expect the party to trust them to protect their lives when they don't trust us, and if they don't, why should we? The sienna-haired man declared, arms crossed over his chest. Naruto looked at the man with a frown on his face. To the blonde shinobi, the man just sounded like he was giving excuses so he didn't have to work hard himself. If the beta testers really did take the good hunting G-spots and quests, then it should have been up to Kibo to work harder to become stronger. Instead, he reminded Naruto of the type of person who felt like the world owed them everything, and blamed hers for their own shortcomings and failures. Some movement from his right caught the whiskered shinobi's attention. Glancing at the cause, Naruto saw Kirito shaking a bit, as if he was struggling with himself. Obviously for some reason affected by Kibao's words. Can I say something? A deep male voice asked. The source of the voice was a tall dark-skinned male with a bald head and brown goatee. His clothes were a mix of white and brown with a white vest, and two silver earrings on his left ear. On his back was a two-handed battle axe. My name is Agile, the man said, walking up to Kibo, imitating the cactus-haired man slightly. Whoa, Naruto said out loud, whistling lowly. That guy is nearly as tall as Uncle A. The blonde shinobi said in amazement. Nowhere near as buff though. He finished, getting incredulous looks from his two new party members, though you could only really see that look coming from Kirito. Neither had seen a man Agile's size, so they found it hard to believe the blonde had seen someone taller and more muscular. What's with those looks? Naruto asked, seeing his teammates staring at him and the looks they were giving him. Kibo, tell me if I got this right. Agile said, drawing the teens' attention back to him. You're saying that because the beta testers didn't stick around to take care of the beginners, that they are the ones responsible for all their deaths. And because of that they should take responsibility by apologizing and give up their winnings, is that right? Why, yeah, that's right. Kibo replied nervously. Agile nodded his head as he pulled out a small plain brown book from his back pocket and showed it to Kibo. You got one of these guide books, didn't you? They were handed out for free at the item store. Sure, I got one, Kibo said defensively. So, What about it? It was compiled from information given by the beta testers. Agile informed him, surprising some of the other players with the info, before turning to face everyone else. Listen up. Everyone had equal access to this information. Even so, lots of players still died. The ex-user said, I thought the topic of discussion here was what we could learn from their deaths. And how that can help us defeat the boss. Agile said, reminding everyone about the whole reason they decided to hold a meeting in the first place, finishing by staring at Kibo evenly. Kibo didn't look at all pleased, but was too intimidated by Agile to fight the man, instead choosing to sit down with his arms crossed and sulking a bit. Okay, can we get back to the meeting now? Diabel asked, after Agile took his seat. And proceeded to tell everyone that the guidebook had on the first floor boss Ilfang the Kobold Lord. Ilfang carries an axe and a buckler. He has 4 health bars. And when the last one turns red, he switches to a curved sword-type weapon called a Talwar. After he was done speaking, the meeting was drawn to an end with the agreement that they would head out for the boss's room at 10 in the morning. Not even a second after the meeting was called to an end, Naruto heard Asuna's cloak rustle as she stood up. Looking to his left, he was just in time to say, or walk out of the amphitheater without saying anything to either him or Kirito. Later that night, those that would be part of the raid group were holding a small celebration. To celebrate them finding the boss's room, new friendships being made, and the possibility that they might not all make it through tomorrow, though no one really wanted to consider that last possibility. Away from the celebration in a back road, Asuna sat by herself on a bench, eating a stale-looking piece of bread, a grimace appearing on what could be seen of her face at the taste, but eating it anyway. Is that any good? Naruto asked, walking up to her and taking a seat beside her, the girl automatically scooting away and putting a bit of space between them. I'm asking because I haven't tried it for myself yet. He explained, a slightly amused look in his eyes at the girl's actions. I don't think they're that bad. Kirito spoke up, having seen one of his party members making their way towards the other and decided to follow him. Naruto scooted to make room for the black-haired swordsman to sit down, Asuna instantly moving again to ensure Naruto wasn't too close this time, causing the blonde shinobi to chuckle slightly. I've been eating one at least daily since coming to this town. Kirito explained, giving the hooded girl a strange look. Of course, I got a trick to make it taste better. He finished. Oh, Naruto said, interested. Kirito brought out a jar from his storage box and held it out for the other two to see. It's the reward for a quest called, The Heifer Strikes Back, from the village before you get to this one. He explained, as Naruto took the jar from him and took off the lid to reveal a yellow cream. Cream? Asuna asked, leaning closer to Naruto to get a clear view. When Naruto glanced at her, the girl instantly leaned back. Yeah, Kirito replied after staring at Naruto for a moment, as the cerulean-eyed shinobi replaced the lid and handed it back to him. Well, I think I got something better, Naruto said, pulling out a scroll from his back pouch. Opening the scroll, he unsealed a bowl of ramen with chopsticks. Kirito was about to say something about the strange way the bowl of ramen appeared in a puff of smoke from a scroll, when the smell of the food hit his senses and almost made his mouth water. Ramen, Naruto declared happily. That smells delicious, Asuna said, looking at the bowl of ramen just as intently as Kirito. Sure does. Kirito agreed absent-mindedly. It's from my own private stash, Naruto told them with a fox-like grin. But since you guys are my teammates, I can part with couple of bowls. The whisker-marked teen decided, handing the first bowl of ramen to Asuna before unsealing one for himself and Kirito. Is it really okay for us to take these? Asuna asked quietly, though her gaze was transfixed on the bowl of ramen in her hands and seemed reluctant to actually give the food back, as she tossed away the piece of bread in favor of the bowl of ramen. Sure, Naruto replied easily enough, I have about 20 bowls of ramen a day, so I make sure to have more than enough stored up. Kirito took a bite of the food and his eyes widened at how tasty it was. This is great, the black-haired teen said, taking another bite of food. How did you get it? He asked, looking at Naruto. Secret, Naruto replied boldly after slurping up some noodles into his mouth. Come on, I'll show you the trick for the Heifer Strikes Back quest. Kirito offered. He would have normally offered to show them the trick for free, but the ramen was too good to pass up on. I'm going to ignore the fact that you suggested that some cream for stale bread is just as good as ramen. Naruto told him in a deadpan. The sound of slurping from his right drew the blonde's attention. Looking towards the source revealed Asuna with the bowl to her lips as she drank down the last of the broth. So good Tilda, Asuna said happily with a blissful sigh. That was fast. Kirito commented astonished. Looking down at the bowl in his hands he noted that it wasn't small in any sense of the imagination. For someone to be able to finish a bowl so quickly was mind-boggling. Hey, a girl after my own heart. Naruto said with his fox-like grin back in place. Or would that be stomach? He wondered to himself before shrugging off the question. Looking at Asuna he said, that's Ichiraku ramen for you. The best ramen in the world. Would you like another one? He asked her at the end. Asuna set the bowl to the side before answering after a moment of silence. I appreciate the offer. But I didn't come to this town to eat good food. Then why did you? Kirito asked, Naruto just as curious. So I don't lose sight of who I am. The girl answered quietly. I'd rather stay myself until the very end than sit and rot away at an inn, back in the first town. I'd rather stay the way I am till the last moment, she continued, clenching her hands together. Even if I get killed by a monster. I don't want to lose to this game, to this world. Asuna finished. Naruto finished his ramen before standing up and taking a couple steps forward. Well, you won't be dying tomorrow. Blonde shinobi declared before looking at them both from over his shoulder. I won't let one of my comrades die, not again. Naruto continued, saying the last part so quietly that Kirito and Asuna barely were able to hear. As the cerulean-eyed teen remembered all those who died during the Fourth Shinobi War. Those who he swore to protect and failed to. Besides, Naruto said, coming out of his morbid thoughts. Not everything about this world is so bad. He stated. How do you figure? Kirito asked skeptically. Asuna giving the blonde a disbelieving look from under her hood. What Kayaba did, trapping everyone here. Forcing them to survive this game or die, for the sake of his own entertainment is absolutely unforgivable. Naruto said strongly, before turning around to face them, but his gaze was focused beyond Kirito and Asuna on the celebrating players. But look at them, even if this world is a virtual one, death isn't the only thing that is real here. The bonds and memories that they are making with one another are just as real, and it will our desire to protect these bonds that will make us all fight that much harder tomorrow. Right now they are all laughing and having fun. If Sao manages to do that and these bonds continue to exist even after the game is cleared, then it is not so bad. The blonde shinobi decided. Kirito and Asuna were looking at him in slight astonishment. Neither thinking the death game in such a manner, neither of their opinions about the game changed all that much, but both would admit that Naruto's way at looking at things was rather nice. And another thing, he continued, his eyes shifting from the celebrating players to his teammates. I want you two to know something, it's something my sensei taught me and my teammates when we first became a team. Those who break the rules are trash, but those who abandon their friends and comrades are worse than trash. So no matter what happens tomorrow, know that you can count on me to stand and fight with you. Naruto finished. Next day, December 3, 2022, Floor 1 Forest Field. The next day the players that made up the raid group were walking through the forest field on their way to the boss room. At the very back of the group, walking a few steps behind everyone, was the party made up of Naruto, Asuna, and Kirito. Let's go over it again. Kirito began explaining the plan one last time. We're the backup. So, our target's going to be the boss's minions, the ruined kobold sentinels. The black-haired swordsman stated. I know. Asuna replied. Naruto said, only half listening to what Kirito was saying. Kirito held back a sigh at Naruto's nonchalance with the situation before continuing. I'll use a sword skill to knock their pole axes up and out of the way. The second I do, switch in. He instructed. Switch? Asuna asked, Naruto staring at Kirito with an obvious look of confusion on his face as well. Kirito looked at his two party members and suddenly a feeling of dread washed over him, as he swallowed hard. Okay, you two need to level with me. Is this the first time you two have ever been in a party? He asked them. Both Naruto and Asuna gave an affirmative reply. Why? In turn caused Kirito to let out a big sigh and his shoulders to drop dramatically. Why me? Kirito thought. Ellipsis. Just outside the boss room everyone gathered to hear some final words from Diabell, who was standing in front of the door that led to the boss room. Listen up, everyone. He spoke, drawing everyone's attention. I've only got one thing to say to you. Let's win. The blue-haired Nai T said before turning around and opening the door. Let's go. The room was dark with little to no light in the room and pillars going all the way to the other side of the room. At the very far end of the room, sitting on a throne with an axe next to it, was a large red-furred monster with a shield on its arm and menacing red eyes. It was Ilfang the Kobold Lord, the boss of the first floor. As the players started stepping into the room lit up and Ilfang jumped from his throne to land in front of the players before unleashing a terrifying roar that summoned 3 armored monsters, which made them look like knights who carried maces. The cursors that appeared above them identified the 3 monsters as ruined kobold sentinels. Commence attack. Diabell shouted, thrusting his sword forward. As the raid group and the enemy rushed at each other at the same time. As the 2 opposing forces met, Diabell was shouting out orders to everyone, keeping the enemy at bay and proving himself a capable leader. Squads A and C. Switch. Here it comes. Squad B, block. Squad C, keep guarding and prepare to switch, now. Everyone else switch, draw, and prepare to attack from the side. Squads D, E and F, keep the sentinels off us. He finished. Yeah, you got it. Kirito replied, dashing at the approaching sentinel, swinging his sword and knocking it back. As soon as he did, he signaled his 2 party members to attack, switch. He called. Right, Naruto said, rushing past Kirito. I'm on it. Asuna said as well, right behind Naruto. The 2 rushed the sentinel at incredible speeds, though He blonde shinobi was holding back to not draw suspicion onto himself. Naruto, bringing out his sword from its sheath on his back, slashed the monster across the chest, and jumped up into the air, before Asuna delivered the finishing strike with her rapier. The sentinel was thrown back from the force of the attacks before shattering into light before disappearing. Amazing, Kirito thought, watching as Naruto landed beside Asuna. The girl's cloak settling down around her after running so fast. I thought that they were both beginners, but their skills and speed are astonishing. I could barely keep up with them. He continued, awed. Good job, you two. The black-haired swordsman murmured with a small smile on his face. Following this strategy, the 3 players steadily dealt with the sentinels as they respawned, while the other players depleted Ilfang's HP bars from 4 to 1. Once it lost most of its HP, it tossed aside its axe and shield in favor of the talwar it seemed to be carrying with a vicious roar. Looks like the guidebook was right, Kibo commented with a smirk, seeing Ilfang acting just as the guidebook said it would. Stand back. Diabell ordered, moving to the front lines. I've got it. Naruto had just knocked back a sentinel for Asuna and Kirito to deal with, as he turned his attention towards what Diabell was doing. I thought the plan was for the entire group to surround it. Naruto thought in confusion, remembering this part of the plan, as Diabell briefly looked their way. Naruto wasn't the only one that was paying close attention to what was going on, as Kirito saw Ilfang draw out the blade on its waist and his eyes widening in alarm. That isn't a talwar. It's a nodaichi, Kirito thought in a panic. It's not the same as the beta test. He realized, as he knocked back a sentinel. Wait, stop. He shouted out a warning to Diabell, drawing the attention of Kibo to himself. Diabell charged at Ilfang with a sword skill activated, not heeding Kirito's warning. Get out of there. Kirito tried to warn him one last time before it was too late. Sadly, his warning was once more ignored and everyone watched as Ilfang jumped up into the air and off the surrounding pillars. Diabell's head swiveled around trying to keep up with Ilfang's fast movements, only being able to see a blur, before landing beside him and delivering a devastating acro. Diabell's chest before following it up with another swing that sent Diabell flying away. Diabell. Kibo shouted in concern for the person that he quickly had come to respect, but he didn't have Tim to check on him, as he had to immediately concentrate on Ilfang, who appeared in front of him and his party members with a blood-curdling roar. Naruto and Kirito made their way to where Diabell lay, while everyone else focused on Ilfang, arriving to see how his health bar was dropping rapidly and was already in the red. Diabell, what the hell were you thinking? Kirito asked as he pulled out a health crystal to restore Diabell's HP. But the blue-haired knight rejected it by pushing it away before Kirito could use it. You were a beta tester, weren't you? Diabell asked the black-haired swordsman weakly. You know what I was trying to do. Kirito nodded his head gravely in confirmation. You were after the last attack bonus rare item. He said, you were a beta tester too. Kirito stated knowingly. Naruto looked down at the dying man conflicted. You ignored the plan for a rare item. Naruto asked, finding it hard to believe the blue-haired man could be so selfish. It was not only his leaf he put in danger by doing that, but everyone else's as well. I know what it must look like, how greedy I must appear. Diabell said, his form becoming unfocused and transparent. But please, defeat the boss, for everyone. He finished before shattering into light. Naruto looked at where Diabell's form previously laid the first casualty of the raid group. And Naruto intended to make sure it was the only one. Diabell let his greed influence him at the end, but Naruto could tell that he wasn't a bad person. The blonde shinobi could tell that Diabell honestly wished to help the other players. He bro. UGHT everyone together that day in order to give everyone hope in beating the game and proved himself a more than capable leader. Up to this point Naruto had been holding back from using his shinobi's kills in order not to draw attention to himself and for the sake of improving his skills within the game. But that wasn't an option any longer. Naruto wasn't about to let another player die that day. Facing Ilfang, Naruto held his sword in his left hand. Let's finish this, Naruto said seriously. Right, Kirito agreed. I'll go too, Asuna said, appearing beside them, staring down Ilfang. Okay, Naruto said, nodding his head in thanks. We'll do this exactly like the Sentinels, except I'll lead this time. The blonde shinobi decided. Got it, understood, Asuna and Kirito replied. Let's go, Naruto said, dashing at Ilfang with Asuna and Kirito flanking him. Rushing past the other players, Naruto formed a Rasengan in his free hand. Kirito's eyes widened seeing the ball of chakra form in Naruto's hand and finally remembering why Naruto seemed familiar to him before. That's, he thought. With a burst of chakra-enhanced speed, Naruto appeared in front of Ilfang for a couple of seconds. All the other players losing complete sight of him, just as the Kobold Lord was going to activate a sword skill. Take this, Rasengan, Naruto shouted, thrusting the Rasengan into Ilfang's large gut. Everyone watched as ball of chakra twisted the monster's gut in the light and wind that came out of the point of contact before Ilfang was thrown back a couple of steps, a good chunk of its remaining health bar disappearing. Switch. Kirito put what he, and everyone else, saw in the back of his mind to ask Naruto about later. Activating his own sword skill, Kirito slashed at Ilfang before Street epping out of the way and let their third-party member continue the assault. Just as Asuna was about to land a hit with her rapier, Ilfang recovered. Asuna, Naruto shouted in warning. The female PLA just barely ducked under Ilfang's swing because of Naruto's warning, her cloak getting destroyed in the process to reveal her slim figure before she landed a powerful strike on Ilfang and knocked it back. Asuna had on a red vest, skirt, and boots combo. She also wore a white long-sleeved shirt and pants. A belt was on her waist that was normally used to hold her rapier. The girl had hazel-colored eyes and long orange-brown hair. Beautiful, Naruto muttered out loud, watching how the light remnants of the destroyed cloak and how Asuna's orange-brown hair settled around her enhanced her beauty even more. Naruto didn't have a problem admitting her hair color drew his attention the most. He's coming back, Kirito shouted, drawing Naruto out of his thoughts of their third-party member and focus back on the boss. Running forward, Naruto blocked Ilfang's attack, giving Kirito an opening to land one of his own, Asuna coming in and thrusting her rapier at Ilfang's large gut. Afterwards, Naruto and Ilfang exchanged multiple strikes, sparks flying around them due to the exchanges, before Ilfang's Nodaichi glowed a light red to indicate its use of a sword skill. Shit, Naruto thought, as he tried to block that attack with his sword only for it to shatter when it came in contact with the Nodaichi before continuing on its course. At the last second, Naruto jumped back in a desperate attempt to avoid the attack. The Nodaichi still cut into his lower abdomen, his Anbu vest offering a little protection, resulting in a shallow wound, but Naruto was still thrown back into Asuna, knocking them both over. Sitting up, Asuna looked down at Naruto, who was still lying on the ground, to see his HP bar from over his shoulder. What caught her off guard was how the health bar didn't drop like it was supposed when struck by a monster. What's going on? She asked out loud in confusion. Damn it, Naruto muttered with a wince, holding the place he was cut with his hand. Seeing the pained expression on Naruto's face caused Asuna to move around him to face his front, only to let out a startled gasp when she saw blood seeping from between his fingers. The orange-brown-haired girl blinked a couple of times. Blood. Asuna mumbled, not quite believing what she was seeing. You're bleeding. How is that possible? She asked, stupefied. Naruto glanced at her, noticing how her attention was focused completely on the blood coming out of his wound, and was trying to figure out what he could say to explain. Before Naruto could even open his mouth to say something, Kirito's voice called out to them. Watch out! The black swordsman shouted. Looking up, just as a shadow appeared around them, the two players saw Ilfang standing above them, his eyes and Nodaichi glowing, a menacing red, its weapon held above its head. Asuna held her rapier protectively, putting it between Ilfang and them. Just as Ilfang was about to bring his Nodaichi down, a beam of green light slammed into the weapon and suddenly Agile was standing in front of them, his axe in mid-swing, as the Kobold Lord slid backwards from the force of the blow before other players charged the boss. The tall man turned his head to the two players. We'll hold this bastard off until you recover. Agile assured them. Thanks, Naruto said with a smirk, Agile nodding his head in response before charging the monster with his other party members. Kirito moving in to help as well when he confirmed that Naruto was okay. Looking at Asuna, Naruto spoke lowly so none of the other players could hear them. I'll explain later, but right now we got to focus on defeating Ilfang. Naruto said seriously. Asuna stared at him for a moment before replying. You're bleeding, we have to stop it, she said with a hint of concern in her voice. Don't worry, Naruto said reassuringly. I heal quickly, he promised. His healing factor was luckily something that he still possessed, as it was part of his Uzumaki heritage and not because of Kurama. Though it was better when the old fox was sealed inside him. Asuna didn't look all that convinced, but her attention was diverted when sound of multiple screams reached their ears. Looking toward the source, they saw most of the players being thrown back, as Ilfang jumped into the air. Seeing Ilfang about to use the same move he used on Daible caused Naruto to quickly stand up and jump after him. Channeling chakra into his legs for an extra boost in power and speed to reach the boss monster much sooner. Where the hell do you think you're going? Naruto demanded, delivering a fist to Ilfang's face, causing it to flip over and finishing it with a kick that sent the red-furred monster back to the ground. Kirito, Asuna, Naruto shouted while still in the air. One last hit. Finish him, the blonde shinobi instructed, pulling out 6 shuriken from his pouch, holding 3 in each hand and throwing them at Ilfang. Roger, you got it, the two said together, rushing at Ilfang, their blades at the ready. Kirito and Asuna dashed toward the first floor boss, Naruto behind them in the air, the shuriken swerving around them and heading straight Ilfang, who was slowly picking itself up off the ground. The shuriken cut into the red-furred boss before Kirito and Asuna reached it, the black-haired swordsman making sure to knock the Nodaichi out of the way, giving Asuna a chance to thrust her rapier at it with a piercing blow before Kirito finished it with a devastating slash across its entire body. Naruto landed on the ground, his eyes transfixed, along with everyone else's, on Ilfang as it rose up into the air, shining a blinding light blue before shattering. Everyone was quiet for a moment, no one quite being able to grasp the situation until a cheer broke the silence. Multiple cheers soon followed. We did it! The raid group celebrated loudly. Naruto walked up to his party members holding his wound. Jumping around like that didn't do him any favors when it came to his wound healing. Good job, you two, the blonde shinobi said, congratulating them both, getting nods of thanks from both. Agile walked up to the small group looking impressed. That was some fine swordsmanship, from the 3 of you. His gaze shifting from each player before resting on Kirito, who was catching his breath after that last attack. Congratulations, today's victory is all thanks to you. Our players seemed to agree as they all started applauding. The celebratory mood though was cut short by Kibo. Why the hell are all of you cheering? The cactus head challenged, sitting where Daible's body lay with his party members. Don't you all get it? They let Daible die, he accused. Let him die, Kirito repeated, confused. That's what I said, Kibo retorted with a few tears. Admit it. You knew the technique the boss was gonna use. If you'd told us about that up front, he wouldn't have died. And what the hell was up with that light show? Magic isn't supposed to be possible in Sao. He finished angrily. They're beta testers. A member of Kibao's party with brown hair accused. They know secrets about the game and are keeping it to themselves. And I bet there are other beta testers here. Come on, show yourselves. Soon whispers started to be muttered and suspicious looks sent at other players, as they each tried to determine who among them was a beta tester. Suspicious looks soon evolved to accusatory ones. As the players started to accuse one another and tempers started to steadily rise. The words beta tester and cheater being thrown around until they combined and became beater. At this rate, Naruto thought, at this rate no one will trust anyone. And if that happens the chances of completing this game and freeing everyone will. He left his thought unfinished. As he tried to think of something to solve this situation. He had to give them a common goal, something he could unite them against, and by the look on Kirito's face he seemed to have come to the same conclusion. Placing a hand on his shoulder stopped the black-haired teen from doing or saying anything as Naruto gave him a reassuring look. Hey, come on, Agile tried to reason to calm everyone down. Beater. Naruto said in a voice that chilled everyone, as the shinobi released the barest hint of Ki, drawing their attention to him and making them jittery. What a stupid thing to call someone. The blonde shinobi claimed. An arrogant smirk worthy of any Uchiha on his face, and he should know Naruto was given that look often enough. Besides, that would only be true if I was a beta tester. But I'm not a beta tester, I'm something more. He stated, forming a Rasengan and holding it up in front of him for everyone to see. What? A few players asked confused. This power is something only I possess. Something the beta testers, or beaters, could ever discover. Naruto said, his face shadowed a bit, making him look all the more ominous. This power makes me stronger and faster than anyone else could ever hope to be. The thing is, with this power, and the other secrets that I know, I can easily clear every floor of Aincard while the rest of you risk your lives. What? Kibo stammered. What kind of monster are you? He demanded in a bit of anger and fear. Nobody but Asuna, Kirito, and Agile noticed how Naruto flinched lightly at being called monster before acting like it didn't affect him. Dismissing his Rasengan and placing a single hand on his waist, monster. Naruto murmured, I haven't been called that in a while, but that isn't quite right. He decided, shifting out his weapons pouch for a scroll and pulling it out. He had this made back in the Elemental Nations when he and Kurama resolved their differences and started to work together near the end of the war. But never got a chance to wear it before coming here. I am Jinchuriki, the power of human sacrifice, the one who bears the hatred of the world. Naruto said, unsealing the item in the scroll to reveal a cloak that looked remarkably similar to his sage cloak. What set this one apart from his sage cloak was that it was a dark orange with long sleeves and black flames on the bottom. Turning around, so his back was now facing the others, Naruto threw on his cloak, revealing the kanji for Jinchuriki written on the back in black. He had it placed there to show everyone back in the elemental nat ions that he had come to terms with what he was and wasn't ashamed of it. Hate me all you want, but don't insult me by lumping me in with the beta testers because I'm nothing like them. He finished, with smirk before walking away from them and heading to the other end of the room, where some stairs had appeared after Ilfang had been destroyed. Naruto had only gotten a few steps up the stairs or the sound of footsteps and someone's voice stopped him. Wait, Asuna said, stopping Naruto mid-step, Kirito beside her. The blonde shinobi let out a chuckle as he turned to face them. So much for a dramatic exit. Naruto said offhandedly, giving his party members a grin. So what's up, guys? It's probably not smart to be seen talking to me after that little show back there. He pointed out. Yeah, about that. Kirito began shrugging his shoulders indifferently. I remember this one guy telling me how those who break the rules are trash, but that those who abandon their friends and comrades are worse than trash. And I didn't want to be considered worse than trash. The black-haired swordsman said, bringing up his inventory screen. Besides, while everyone is distracted right now, they will eventually remember accusing me of being a beta tester, and unlike you, I actually am a beta tester. He continued, equipping a long black coat, the last attack bonus rare item that Diabell was after, the Coat of Midnight. And I actually like the name Beater. He finished with smile on his face. Asuna looked at Kirito, surprised at the new bit of information, before turning her attention back to Naruto. You called my name when we were fighting, how do you know it? She asked him, looking at him seriously, and you said you'd explain how you were bleeding earlier. Asuna reminded him. Kirito's gaze shifted to Asuna before turning back to Naruto. Now that he looked the blonde over more closely, he could just make out some blood stains around where his vest was torn. How is that even possible? The game shouldn't allow for torn clothing. The clothes either look fine or they're destroyed, it's not possible for it to be damaged. He thought in confusion. Plus that Rasengan thing you used ain't the boss reminded me why you seemed so familiar before. Kirito continued out loud. It looked a lot like the Rasenshuriken that was thrown at Kayaba on the first day of the game. That was you. The black swordsman finished factually. As Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly at being found out. Well, Naruto started, his gaze shifting between his two party members before settling on Asuna. You can see a couple of other HP bars below yours around here, right? Naruto asked, holding his hand up indicating where it should be. There should be names written next to them. Asuna focused her gaze where Naruto indicated and did see a couple of other HP gauge below hers. Naruto. Asuna read, Kirito, those are your names. The orange-brown-haired player asked, looking between the two. Yeah, Naruto replied. Asuna giggled a bit. Oh, it's been there all this time. I guess with everything that happened we never introduced ourselves to each other. He said before scratching his cheek awkwardly. Though with a small smile on his face, enjoying the sound of Asuna's laughter. As to the other stuff, that's going to take a while to explain, and it's not the sort of thing I want others listening in on. So we need to find somewhere we can talk privately without being overheard. That's fine, Kirito said, walking up to the doors at the end of the stairs and opening them. I'll lead us to a safe zone I know about. I want to hear this as soon as possible. He stated. All right then, lead the way. Naruto said, Kirito nodding his head and moving through the doors. As the blonde shinobi and Asuna followed behind him, Kirito was true to his word and quickly led the party of three to a safe zone. They had to fight some monsters along the way, and though they were all a bit worn out from their recent battle with Ilfang, they swiftly dispatched whatever monsters they came across. Through it all, Asuna had kept a close watch on Naruto, looking for any signs that the injury he received from the first boss was affecting him. Naruto and Kirito made themselves comfortable after arriving at the safe zone, but Asuna refrained from doing that as she stood over Naruto with her hands on her hips. Alright, before you start explaining what's going on with you, Asuna said, giving Naruto a pointed look. I think it would be best to take a look at your wound. We don't have anything that we can use to treat it, but we should still make sure that it's not getting worse. So take your shirt and armor off. She finished with a light blush at telling a, admittedly handsome teen male to take off his shirt in front of her. There is no need for that. Naruto replied unconcernedly as he lifted up his shirt where Ilfang had injured him. Only to reveal that there was no wound whatsoever, and the only proof that he had been cut at all was the dried up blood that once surrounded where the wound was once located. How is that possible? Asuna said, astonished, taking a closer look at where she knew the injury should be. I was sure. Asuna. Naruto said uncomfortably. What is it? Asuna asked, looking up towards the blonde to look him straight in the eye. Why to notice just how close their faces were to one another. For a few seconds the two just stared at each other as Asuna's face steadily started to redden before she finally reacted, PP pervert. The girl screamed, hastily backing away from the whiskered blonde, before proceeding to glare at him. How am I a pervert? Naruto demanded, standing up at Asuna's accusation. Because you are. Asuna told him as if it was obvious. Lacking any real sense of logic, as if just saying made it true. Such was the inner workings of the female mind, an impossible puzzle that not even the wisest of men could ever hope to solve. Naruto blanched at the female player's continued claim. The confidence that her voice carried making the blonde shinobi silently wonder if Asuna somehow figured out his past association with countless perverts and the few times he did something perverted. He was a 12-year-old kid, entering puberty, who traveled with a man that proudly claimed to be a super pervert for 2.5 years. There was no way that he was going to return to Konoha completely innocent, much to the dismay and ire of Tsunade. Kirito stared at the two, unsure if he should be laughing at the TTLE comedy act that was happening in front of him or try to remind the two what they were supposed to be discussing at the moment. A part of him was telling him to stay quiet or risk drawing Asuna's ire to himself and somehow end up being labeled a pervert as well. Alright guys, I think we should get back on track here. The black-haired swordsman eventually got out. Kirito speaking up drew the Thertu's attention to him, and for a moment they just stared at him impassively. Feeling their gazes locked on him, Kirito fidgeted uneasily, wishing that he had just kept his mouth shut. They were quiet for a moment longer before the silence was finally broken by Asuna. HMPH, fine. She said in a huff as she sat down, away from Naruto, with her arms crossed over her chest. Naruto sat down as well as he scratched the back of his head, wondering where he should start and how much he could really tell them. There were things that Naruto wanted to keep to himself, things he wasn't comfortable talking about. His childhood, for example. Then there were things he didn't mind telling them about. His status as a Jinchuriki had become a point of pride for him and was something that he wanted to hide. If they couldn't accept his former status, then that was solely their problem. Naruto had long stopped caring if people would accept him or not because of Kurama. Those who could really call friends would look past the fox and see him. Those that didn't weren't worth thinking about. Where should I start? Naruto wondered out loud. Kirito looked at Naruto curiously. How about the beginning? He suggested. The suggestion had the blonde thinking. The beginning. Naruto repeated, a sad mirthless smile appearing on his face. What would constitute as the beginning? When Hashirama and Madara were alive? Or did everything begin on the night of his birth? At times, when there was a lull in the war and the whiskered shinobi had time to himself, to think, it felt like there was a greater force at work driving everything to a certain point. Either way, Naruto knew that he had to tell Kirito and Asuna something. Kirito and Asuna silently stared at the blonde, neither wishing to disturb him when they noticed the distant, almost haunted look that appeared in his eyes as he considered Kirito's suggestion. Coming to a decision, Naruto focused his attention back to the two players that were waiting for him to start talking. If he was going to explain things to them, it would be best to start with who he was. Okay, for starters, my name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze and I am a shinobi from Konohagakure no Sato. Naruto began, and for the next couple of hours he told them of everything that he found of relative importance, answering the occasional question that they had along the way. You called yourself a Jinchuriki before. Asuna pointed out after not got done retelling his story. What is that? She asked. It sounds Japanese. Kirito added, but it's not at the same time, and I've never heard that word before. Jinchuriki, Naruto started steadily. It literally means the power of the human sacrifice. It is a word that classifies a certain type of people, those with one of the 9 biju sealed inside of them. He explained to them before letting out a sigh. But most of the time it is used as a slur that means that we are less than human in the eyes of others. And you are a Jinchuriki? Asuna asked him curiously. Yup, Naruto replied cheerfully. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, strongest of the biju, at your service. I don't know, Kirito began skeptically, putting his hand against his chin in thought, after hearing Naruto's declaration. I don't quite buy it. This all seems too far-fetched to me. Asuna looked at the black-haired swordsman. You think that it might be a trick? She asked him. Maybe, Kirito replied, looking at Naruto intently. Kayaba could have programmed Naruto into the game to trick and confuse players. He said logically from his point of view. While Naruto personally didn't like the fact that they were questioning if he was telling the truth or not, as a shinobi he could appreciate their sense of caution. They could at least stop talking about me like I wasn't here. Naruto thought with a pout. We'll need to think of something that proves that he is telling the truth. Kirito stated. Asking him to just do one of his jutsu wouldn't be enough since they all could be programmed into the game. Like? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. Right now we can ask you a bunch of questions. Kirito suggested. If there are things that you don't know about your own past or inconsistent in your answers, that should at least give us a hint on whether you're telling the truth or not. It wasn't a perfect plan. Though it would probably take a while to catch the blonde in a lie if that was in fact the case, but at the very least they had something to go on. Alright, Naruto said, agreeing with the idea. What do you want to know first? Quote, for the next hour and a half Kirito and Asuna would ask Naruto a variety of questions about himself, where he came from, and the world in general. Some questions were so mundane most people would never even bother thinking about them on a normal basis, others were so complicated that Naruto took a minute before giving a satisfactory answer. Finally, after an early 2 hours, Kirito and Asuna were running out of things to ask Naruto. Okay, Kirito said, trying to think of something to ask. First kiss. Naruto opened his mouth to answer until the question registered in his mind and caused him to freeze before he could answer. The disaster of the memory that was his first kiss flashed through Naruto's mind. Even now, years later, the blonde shinobi still felt like retching at the memory of that day. See, can I have any other question? Naruto asked shakily. Anything at all. Kirito and Asuna looked at the whisker-marked teen curiously, neither understanding why he was suddenly so hesitant when he didn't have trouble answering any of their other questions. Why? Kirito asked with a raised eyebrow. Maybe they finally caught Naruto in something that EY could use to prove that he was a program that Kayaba had placed into the game to trick players. I don't want to talk about it. Naruto answered evasively. That's not a good enough answer, Kirito refuted. You have to answer all our questions honestly. If we leave even one unanswered or lie to us, then there is no way we can believe you. The black-haired swordsman explained. Maybe this is personal, or Naruto just hasn't kissed anyone yet. Asuna suggested. Then why not just say that? Kirito questioned her. Or hesitate at all. Up until now, no matter the question, he has answered them without hesitation. The fact that he hasn't means that he either can't answer the question because Kayaba didn't program an answer into him. The beta player stated, bringing up a good argument. Or something happened that he doesn't want to talk about. He finished by looking at Naruto intently, waiting for him to answer. Naruto sighed once he realized that he wasn't getting out of answering that question. Sasuke Uchiha. The blonde shinobi mumbled, embarrassed, looking away from the other two. For a moment Kirito and Asuna just stared at Naruto. He had told them about Sasuke Uchiha and the Konoha 11 during his explanation of where he came from, and the reaction this admittance had varied between the other two players. Kirito burst out laughing while a dark blush spread across Asuna's face as she pictured Naruto kissing Sasuke, or a figment of her imagination of the Uchiha. Needless to say, what she pictured and what actually happened were two completely different things. It's not funny. Naruto shouted at Kirito when the black-haired player didn't stop laughing. He still shivered at the memory, and a part of him would die each time he remembered that day. It didn't help that the only other time he had kissed someone, the woman, which he thanked Kami for that little respite, was trying to suck out all of his chakra and effectively kill him. And what the hell are you thinking? The blue-eyed teen demanded, rounding on Asuna as he noticed that the chestnut, bordering on orange-haired girl started to drool. Sorry, Kirito apologized, though it didn't look like he was sorry since he was still laughing. But I believe you now, he added. That caught Naruto by surprise. Why? He asked. Because there is no way that Kayaba would ever think to make your first kiss with a guy, and I can't think of anyone who would want to admit it. Kirito said, unless you're, he continued suggestively. In which case good for you, but I'm straight, so don't even think about it. I could kill you right now. Naruto muttered, glaring at Kirito before looking towards Asuna. What about you, Asuna? Do you believe me? He asked her. The sound of Naruto's voice snapped Asuna out of whatever daydream she was having. And for the sake of everyone's sanity, it will be left a mystery. Looking at Naruto, the hazel-eyed player still had a light tint of red on her cheeks. Of course. She stuttered out before composing herself. It's kind of hard to believe though. I know what you mean. Kirito said, nodding his head in agreement. There are theories of multiple and an alternate universe. For those theories to be proven true is nothing short of incredible. He stated in awe, and kind of overwhelming. Just think what other worlds might be out there. The swordsman added. Streetly Naruto didn't want to think about it. He was still having trouble wrapping his head around the fact that he was trapped in video game in a different dimension. The last thing he wanted was to try And figure out what other worlds existed, so what now? The blonde shinobi asked, Asuna looking towards Kirito for an answer as he was the most experienced player of the three of them. I guess, Kirito started, that the next course of action would be to travel to the nearest town and restock on any supplies that we might need. The teen advised, Naruto lost his sword in the boss battle, so PPing by a weapon shop is probably a good idea. He continued before looking towards Asuna. We'll have to watch his back until we reach the next town in case any monsters appear. The swordsman told her. Right, Asuna replied. Oi, Naruto protested, it's not like I'm helpless. The azure-eyed teen stated, pulling out a kunai for them to see. Yeah, sort of forgot about your abilities for a second there. Kirito admitted sheepishly before a smile appeared on his face. They will be a big help in clearing the game though. He added positively. Maybe not, Naruto said hesitantly. Asuna looked at Naruto confused. What do you mean? She asked him curiously. I'll show you. Naruto told her instead, standing up and gesturing for them to follow him. Come on, he urged them. The two were confused by what Naruto wanted to show them instead of just answering Asuna's question, but chose to follow him anyway. Their confusion only grew when the blonde shinobi led them out of the safe zone only to come to a stop ahead of a wolf. One slightly stronger than the ones on the first floor, which had yet to notice them. Watch, but be ready just in case. Naruto warned them. Neither Kirito nor Asuna were sure what Naruto was doing, but both drew out their respective weapons just in case. Naruto walked away from his two party members and closer to the wolf, still keeping a good distance away, so that it didn't react to his presence, before he brought both of his hands up in a familiar hand seal, shadow clone jutsu. The shinobi called, summoning two clones to appear beside him. Kirito and Asuna were momentarily stunned by Naruto's jutsu. It was one thing to hear about it and something completely different to see it happen in front of them. Their surprise was short-lived when they noticed the wolf's reaction to Naruto's jutsu and what happened afterwards. The wolf's attention snapped towards Naruto, even though he remained out of range of its awareness, and three other wolves spawned beside it. Without a moment's hesitation, Naruto and his clones charged at the four wolves, each of them pulling out their own kunai, at the same time the wolves did. Naruto and his clones took care of the wolves in a matter of seconds. But as if to prove a point, Naruto created a Rasengan and slammed it into the last wolf, only for four more to immediately appear. One of the wolves spawned so close to Naruto that it could rake its claws down the side of the shinobi's arm before Naruto could react, blood appearing on the wolf's claws. Seeing Naruto be injured, Asuna instantly dashed towards the small pack of wolves. Rapier at the ready and a sword skill ready to be released. Kirito stood back and watched things with a thoughtful look on his face. What's going on? He thought silently. They shouldn't be respawning that quickly. And that first wolf, it started to attack Naruto even though he was still at a safe distance. Is this what Naruto wanted us to see? Kirito wondered. It was only a couple of minutes later that Naruto and Asuna finished dealing with the wolves, Naruto dismissing his clones soon after Asuna joined the fight. Once the last wolf was defeated, Naruto and Asuna sheathed their weapons and rejoined Kirito. What was that? Kirito asked Naruto after they returned to the safe zone. Naruto ran his hand through his hair before answering. It started a couple of weeks after the start of the game. Naruto began, whenever I used a jutsu, more monsters would suddenly appear to fight me. It took me a while before I realized that Kayaba must have found a way to track my chakra and made it so monsters would appear and attack whenever I do. The shinobi explained. There are a few exceptions, like using chakra to enhance my physical abilities. It is just when I use a jutsu when that seems to happen. Or in a safe zone. And, from what happened earlier, I can also use jutsu during a boss battle. It was because of this that I started to improve my skills within the game. Naruto finished. Kayaba probably set up a program that would search for anomalies within the game with your chakra in mind and have monsters appear, whenever an anomaly was detected, to try and eliminate that anomaly. Kirito reasoned. Anomaly. Asuna repeated, confused. It's something that isn't consistent with the game's system. Kirito explained for both Asuna's and Naruto's benefit. Naruto is a perfect example of this because he is neither a player nor originally part of the game. Then what would he be? The hazel-eyed player asked. An AI, Naruto answered in Kirito's place, drawing the other two's attention back to him. An artificial intelligence, maybe artificial anomaly would be better, or like Kirito said, just an anomaly. Kirito looked at Naruto curiously. Yes, something like that. The black-haired swordsman agreed. How do you know those terms? Kirito asked Naruto. I thought your world didn't have that much advanced technology. It was a legit question from what Naruto just got through telling them the elemental nations weren't the most advanced when it came to technology, choosing to settle for what worked instead of trying to improve them. Naruto scratched the back of his head awkwardly. That's kind of complicated and I don't really know how it happened, Naruto mumbled, as he lifted up his left hand and swiped it to the side and a screen appeared in midair. Kirito and Asuna were about to dismiss it until they noticed that it wasn't the normal menu screen and instead was an internet search engine, and near Naruto a transparent keypad popped up. With a few, awkwardly slow keystrokes from Naruto, the screen changed to show a news broadcast of Japan and the current events detailing the players trapped within in Sao. Kirito and Asuna watched on silently as Naruto brought up more screens, each displaying different sites with information about the Japan and the rest of the world. I'm trapped in Sao, but not like you guys. I can't escape it. But I'm also not bound to all its rules like you two. After seeing Kayaba doing this on the first day, I eventually tried it for myself and this happened. The blonde shinobi explained. I learned about AIs after learning about another game called The World where players were reported going into comas after encountering AIs in the game before it was eventually shut down. Kirito had never heard of that game before, which meant that it probably existed and shut down while he was still just a kid, or possibly before he was even born. Either way, that didn't really matter with what he was currently seeing. This is great, Kirito said excitedly, a hopeful gleam in his eyes as he stared at the various screens. With this we'll be able to communicate with the outside world and get some help. Naruto let out a sigh, not looking forward to what he would have to tell them next, especially since an equally, or even more so, hopeful expression appeared on Asuna's face, as the girl probably was looking forward to communicating with her own family. We can't do that, Naruto told them regretfully, especially when they turned their attention completely on him with an almost desperate and pleading look in their eyes. Why? Kirito asked him. It's one of the restrictions placed on me. Naruto started. I can't send out any kind of communication to the rest of the world. I think it's the same thing that keeps me trapped in Sao. I probably won't be able to send a message to the outside world until the game is cleared. The blonde shinobi stated. Kirito let out a downtrodden sigh. Well, that's a letdown, he muttered, looking up. I'm sorry, Naruto said, finding it to be the only thing he could say to them. It's not your fault, Asuna assured him softly, sending the blonde a small smile. While it's unfortunate that we can't contact our families, or anyone in the real world, it just gives us all the more reason to clear the game. Yeah, Kirito said, agreeing with Asuna. This doesn't really change anything. So don't worry about it, he said nonchalantly before a smirk appeared on his face. Besides, at least like this we can listen to music besides the game's BGM and watch a movie every once in a while. The black-haired swordsman finished, drawing amused smiles from the other two. Right, Naruto said with his fox-like grin before he stood up. So unless someone has something else to add, we should start making our way to the next town. He finished, looking towards the other two. I'm ready, Asuna answered, as she and Kirito stood up. Let's get going then, Kirito stated. As the three made their way out of the safe zone and towards the nearest town on the second floor, more confident than ever of the person they were each partying with and their chances of someday escaping Sao. Monsters were dispatched by the party of three as they made their way to the first town on the second floor of Aincard, falling to Asuna's rapier, Kirito's sword, or Naruto's kunai or shuriken. Neither player voiced it, but as they watched Naruto fight off whatever monster appeared without an actual weapon, they wondered at the kind of life he must have lived, the challenges that he had to have faced to never hesitate when a creature could skewer you at any moment and end your life, and if they could have possibly lived in such a world, as they were now, they really doubted it. While the threat of death was real for all of them, it was more real for Naruto, as one hit in the wrong place would see him killed instantly instead of his health bar dropping a few points. Kirito ALS. Oh felt a sense of guilt deep within him as he fought alongside the other two as he recalled the first friend he made within Sao back in the town of beginning on the day they discovered that they trapped within the game. Klein was a player with spiked up red hair held in place by the ugliest bandana Kirito had seen in his life, but Klein seemed to be fond of the beginning of facial hair along his chin that gave him an unkempt look. His armor, while the standard wear, looked almost like that belonging to a just flourishing samurai, which was funny because his avatar's features fitted perfectly BEF. Or Kayaba changed everyone's appearance to what they really looked like in real life. He looked a few years older than Kirito and quite a few inches taller. Despite their difference in age, the Love F or MMORPGs formed a bond between them that saw the normally antisocial Kirito considering the man a friend. But when it came time to leave the town of beginnings after Kayaba's announcement, Kirito had abandoned his friend. Klein had logged onto Sao with the full intention of meeting up with some friends from a previous game, and though Kirito offered to lead Klein safely to the next town, so that they could get a small advantage over the other players that remained shocked in the town square, Klein refused to leave his friends behind. But the idea of leading even one more person in the Death G aim and being responsible for their lives had been too much pressure and too much responsibility on the off chance that they could die while Kirito was leading them. So the two split ways with the promise of meeting up again at a later date. Now Kirito found himself partied with two other players, referring to Naruto as anything but another player would just be too much of a hassle, who had never played an online game like Sao in their lives. He wondered what made them so different when not even a month ago, not even a few days ago, he wasn't willing to party with a group of veteran players. Just watching them for a few seconds revealed what made them so different. Asuna was faster than anyone. With just a month of experience playing their first MMORPG had the right to have. Kirito had no hardcore gamers that wouldn't have been able to accomplish what she had with only a month, despite their circumstances. At times Kirito still found himself in awe of the orange-brown-haired girl as she moved almost gracefully around monsters like it came naturally to her. It wouldn't surprise him at all if Asuna took dance lessons back in the real world. What he was more in awe of was how quick why the girl picked things up, as he only had to go over things briefly with her before she understood them when they were making their way to Ilfang's lair, making him wonder if she wasn't some type of genius. With Naruto it wasn't so hard to determine what set him apart from everyone else. If his story was to be believed, and Kirito found little reason not to, since he was a kid Naruto had been trained to fight, to survive. And as much as he didn't want to think about it, to kill. For Naruto, going from his world to Sao mustn't have been too much of a big difference, unlike all other players PPED in Sao who probably never had to fight for their lives. Along with the skills the blonde trained over the years to obtain and the jutsu he possessed, he was years ahead of anyone else in the game. Though the fight with the first floor boss proved that Naruto was anything but invincible. That still didn't explain what caused Kirito to so easily to continue to lead them across the second floor. "Hey, what's the matter with you?" Naruto asked Kirito bluntly as he noticed how deep in thought the black-haired swordsman seemed to be. "Huh, oh, it's nothing," Kirito answered, coming out of his GHTS about his two party members to notice that they were close to the first and main town of the second floor, Urbis. "Looks like we're here," he declared obviously. "Yup," Naruto agreed wholeheartedly. "Let's check this place out," the shinobi said excitedly. Kirito gave Naruto an hesitant grin. "While that sounds like fun," the swordsman began, "we should probably go to the weapons shop first and get you a new sword," he advised. "Afterwards we should head to the armor shop. They probably won't have anything all that better than what you could get on the first floor shops, but it never hurts to check," Kirito finished. Naruto blinked a couple times owlishly before threw a fox-like grin Kirito's way as he scratched the back of his head. "Oh right, that's what I was going to do," the shinobi claimed. "Right," Kirito dragged out unbelievingly. Even with the couple of days that he has known Naruto, Kirito realized when the cerulean-eyed teen was excited about something he could get forged. TFUL and careless to the point that it could be mistaken for stupidity. Asuna couldn't help but giggle a little at Naruto's antics. Naruto was a bit of a mystery to the hazel-eyed girl. She couldn't quite understand how he could be so serious one moment and carefree the next. She supposed it had something to do with the way he grew up. Either way, she was grateful for his easygoing personality as the stories he told of the pranks he pulled made her laugh and made her feel that she was hanging out with a couple of new friends she had made and not trapped in a virtual world. When she was aware of her situation, she wasn't as worried because the confidence Naruto projected was so great that Asuna couldn't help but believe for herself that they would conquer all 100 floors of Aincard. Whatever monster they came across, there wasn't an ounce of hesitance within Naruto when they faced it. You can see it in his eyes. Asuna decided, having caught herself staring into his cerulean blue eyes more than once. No matter what we face, Naruto believes completely that we can win. What are you laughing at, Asuna? Naruto questioned the girl next, taking her hand in his and proceeded to lead her away deeper into the town. Hey, hold on a sec. Kirito called after the two, noticing that Asuna made absolutely no attempt to free herself of Naruto's grasp and was actually laughing a bit more as the shinobi led her into the town. You don't know where the weapons shop is, he pointed out as he rushed to catch up with the two before Naruto ended up taking them all across the town. All right, we've finally gotten that taken care of, Kirito muttered. Naruto had ended taking them in the completely opposite direction from where Kirito knew the best weapons shop to be located in the town. Catching up to them, he took them to the weapons shop and then to the armor shop where Naruto got himself a new vest, but that was mostly for the new shirt that came with it, as he immediately put his Anbu vest back on since it offered better protection. Do you really need all those swords? Kirito questioned Naruto. The number of swords that Naruto had bought at the weapons shop was ridiculous, and left the two other players surprised by the sheer number. Yup, Naruto replied, fixing the sword that he had strapped on his back, the sword obstructing the word Jinchuriki a bit. Regular swords break easily when I use them. It might be a side effect of my being here. A rare sword might do better, but until I get one I need to stockpile on these. He told them. How many swords have you broken already? Asuna asked curiously. I don't know, Naruto said, shrugging his shoulders. 50, he guessed. Seriously, Kirito mumbled, getting Naruto to shrug his shoulders again in response. Well, ignoring that, it's getting pretty late, so we should think about finding a place to stay. Is there an inn close to here? Naruto asked. Yeah, there is, Kirito answered after thinking about it for a second as he got another idea. But I just remembered about this quest outside of the city that we can do. It's not so hard and the reward is to stay in this farmhouse. It might not seem like much, but at least we won't be bothered by other players, and the farmhouse has a bath that we could use. He told them. In the blink of an eye, Asuna was standing in front of him, her hands holding his arms, as her face came in close. Did you say a bath? The hazel-eyed girl asked seriously. Why, yes ma'am, Kirito replied, somewhat fearfully, uncomfortable with the intense look in Asuna's eye and her being so close to him so suddenly. Then what are we waiting for? Asuna demanded. Let's get going, she all but ordered. Taking a proper bath was something that Asuna had seriously missed since being trapped in Sao. All right, Kirito said with a small awkward smile, his eyes closed. Naruto was smart enough not to say anything, having past experience with similar situations with Sakura and standing between something she wanted. As they were walking to where the NPC that would assign them the quest was located, Naruto couldn't help but look around at all the players already within the city. Sure are a lot of people here already, Naruto commented. Some of the people he spotted he didn't even recognize as being part of the raid group that had fought Ilfang. In fact, he hadn't seen any other players since Kayaba explained everything back in the town of beginning. They probably got word from the others that the first floor was cleared and used the teleportation gate in the town of beginning to get here. Kirito explained for Naruto's benefit, as he too looked at the other players that gathered, noting the faint looks of hope that some carried. Teleportation gate? The shinobi questioned. Yeah, the black-haired swordsman replied. It's a quick way to move between the floors without having to go through every dungeon or floor just to get to the ones higher up or at the lower levels. Of course that only works after the floor boss is defeated and the next floor is opened. Kirito told him, as he pointed to the general direction that the teleportation gate was located from his experience in the beta test. I think I get it, Naruto muttered with his arms crossed in front of him and a thoughtful look on his face. Don't worry, you'll catch on soon enough, Kirito assured the blonde. Having to remind himself that despite the fact that Naruto could pull up information from the internet and the skills he possessed, he still was new to MMORPG in general. Their conversation was cut off when they heard an angry shout from a nearby male player. "What kind bullshit is this?" the player demanded. Turning to the source, they spotted one player holding up a much shorter player up by his shirt. "What's going on?" Asuna asked curiously, staring at the scene, like a lot of other players, which was happening a few feet away. "I'm not," Kirito began before he spotted the small rug, anvil and hammer and sign that said Neja's blacksmith. "He's a blacksmith," Kirito figured. "Blacksmith? What is a blacksmith doing here?" Naruto questioned. Blacksmiths were common in T.E. elemental nations, so it's not like he didn't know who they were, but what he didn't know was what the purpose of one was within the game. Blacksmith is a skill that can develop in the game. Kirito started, they create, maintain, and enhance weapons and certain items if they are brought the right material. This isn't a certain thing and there is a chance of some problem happening while it is being enhanced. I'm guessing that's what happened to that guy and why he's so mad. The swordsman figured, as the three watched some of the players' friends start to pull him away from who they could only figure to be Neja. "Anyway, we should get going before it gets too late," Kirito finished as they all left. After accepting the quest from the farmer NPC, Kirito led Naruto and Asuna to where the quest was to take place. "Okay, so the quest is pretty simple," Kirito began, reminding the other two of what they had to do. "All we have to do is defeat some wind wasps to complete the quest," he stated, looking at the wasp monsters that littered the area. "Seems easy enough," Asuna commented, rapier at the ready. "The quest is not all that hard," Kirito admitted again. "It doesn't offer much in the way of experience or call, with the only real reward is the chance to stay in the farmhouse, though the wind wasps kind of make up for it with the experience you get for defeating one. But it's perfect quest for a couple of newbies." "Newbies, huh?" Asuna muttered as he gave the black-haired boy a light glare. "So do you think you're better than us?" she asked him dangerously. "I didn't say that," Kirito hastily said, recognizing the possible danger that he was in. He looked to Naruto for some possible help, maybe even distracting Asuna with telling her a story about a prank he pulled back home. She seemed to enjoy those. But all the shinobi did was give him a pitying look. "But you definitely implied it," the orange-brown-haired girl pointed out. "Can we not make a big deal about this?" the swordsman almost begged. "No, let's," Asuna countered. "A bet, first one that beats 50 wind wasps wins," the female player stated. The swordsman looked completely unsure if should take the bet, and what happens to the person who loses? Kirito asked tentatively. "Simple," Asuna answered. "The one who loses has to pay for dinner for the winner and Naruto," she said. "Me?" Naruto pointed to himself dumbly. "I'm not going to be part of the bet," he asked. "No," Asuna said, shaking her head. "We need someone to keep track of how many monsters we each defeat to make sure nobody cheats." While a little disappointed that he wouldn't get to be part of the competition, Naruto nodded his head in acceptance. With that cleared up, Asuna turned her attention back to Kirito. "Well?" she asked expectantly. "Fine," Kirito agreed, just to keep things from getting more troublesome. "Whenever you're ready," he said with a sigh. The two players got in their respective ready stances as they waited for a signal from their third-party member for them to begin their competition. Seeing that Asuna and Kirito were waiting for his signal, Naruto brought his hands together in a cross-hand seal. "Shadow Clone Jutsu," he shouted, forming a single clone beside him. At the formation of the clone, Kirito and Asuna took off at the wind wasps that had now turned their attention to them, as more appeared beside them. Wind wasps were mostly earth and black bee monsters with green stripes and stingers the size of ice picks. With their ability to fly, the wind wasps flew up high before dive bombing at the two players. Kirito dodged to the side of the wind wasp that was closest to him and struck it at its side with his sword. Spinning around on a single foot, Kirito activated a sword skill and slashed at another wind wasp, just re-registering the sound of shattering glass that signified that he destroyed the first wasp. Destroying the second, Kirito spared Asuna a glance to see how she was doing. Asuna walked calmly yet confidently towards a group of 3 wind wasps that were flying towards her, her hazel-colored eyes steeled with pure determination. Raising her iron rapier, it glowed with the activation of a sword skill before unleashing it. The 3 wind wasps fell under a barrage of strikes from Asuna's rapier, flashes of light the only evidence that they had been struck. The wasps shattered around Asuna before the female rushed at another group of monsters. I might be in trouble, Kirito thought briefly before running at another wind wasp, redoubling his efforts in order so he didn't fall too far behind. Naruto watched Asuna in amazement once more, like the first time he saw her after Ilfang tore her cloak, unable to help think how beautiful the girl looked as her hair flew behind her as she destroyed monsters left and right. For a moment Naruto was so busy watching Asuna he almost forgot to keep count of the monsters that she had destroyed. Asuna was hardly the fastest person that he had ever seen, but the speed and accuracy of her strikes still left him in awe as each wind wasp was hit no less than 3 times before they were destroyed and the girl moved to her next target. While Naruto kept a careful watch of the number of wind wasps each player destroyed, he also made sure to attack any wasps that snuck up on either player, destroying them before they had a chance to land an attack on either Kirito or Asuna. Naruto wouldn't admit that he kept an extra close eye on Asuna. Several minutes later and many defeated wind wasps, more than enough to complete their quest, Kirito and Asuna were nearing the end of their competition, both of them slightly exhausted. You know, Kirito got out between breaths, we can stop this right here and call this all off right now. He commented somewhat hopefully. Not a chance. Asuna returned. You're paying for dinner for Naruto and me. She stated confidently. Yeah, I didn't think so. Kirito admitted with a muttered sigh, as another group of wind wasps respawned in front of them at an accelerated rate. Sparing a glance to look over his shoulder at the cause at the faster respawn rate of the monsters, Kirito was of 2 minds about it. On one hand, it meant more monsters they could get experience points off of. On the other, they had practically no time to rest and catch their breath as they were constantly fighting the monsters that showed up. Sidestepping a wind wasp stinger, Kirito drove his sword into the base of the wasp's stomach, hitting it in its weak point and destroying it instantly before going after another one. Asuna ran at another wasp, deflecting its stinger, and took advantage of the 5-second delay to activate her sword skill linear, and with a single thrust of her rapier Asuna forced the wasp back before it shot into light particles and to the sound of a window shattering. That's it, Naruto shouted, bringing the competition to a close, as he dismissed his clone and dashed at the small group of wind wasps that Kirito and Asuna still had to fight, helping them destroy the remainders. So, Kirito said after the last wind wasp was destroyed and another didn't immediately take its place. Who won? He asked. With a score of 46-50. Naruto began purposely drawing out, telling them who won. The winner is Asuna, he finished with a fox-like grin. Aw man, that sucks. Kirito muttered, his head dropped in disappointment. And I was so close too. He continued, letting out a sigh before looking over at Asuna. Looks like you won, Asuna. Kirito finished. Was there ever any doubt? Asuna replied with a smirk on her face as a translucent screen appeared in front of her. Looking over everything she got from the wind wasp, she spotted something that grabbed her attention. What's this? The female wondered as she materialized the item. In her hands a rapier appeared. It was a thin sword with a dark green dome-shaped guard. Asuna's eyes trailed from the rapier's hilt all the way to the tip of the sword. Wind Fleuret, she said, reading the name of the weapon out loud. Seems like you got lucky with that last kill, Kirito commented. That's a monster drop, he informed both Naruto and Asuna. Before a thoughtful look crossed his face. Now that I think about it, Wind Wasp also drops Wind Wasp Needle, which we can use to enhance weapons. Kirito continued. With both we can make the Wind Fleuret even stronger. So we'll have to find a blacksmith. Asuna clarified. Yup, Kirito replied. Although we should wait until tomorrow since it is getting late. He remarked as the sun had already begun to set since the start of their little competition. Alright, Naruto said, agreeing. Besides, I could use a bath. The reminder of what the reward for the quest that they just completed snapped Asuna out of her reverie of her new weapon. In an instant Asuna had her new rapier just inches away from Naruto's face, as she fixed him with a steely glare. Not before me, she said evenly. Got that? Got it. Naruto replied nervously with a sweat drop. Good, Asuna continued cheerfully as she swapped out her iron rapier for the Wind Fleuret and had it sheathed at her waist. Naruto and Two stood next to each other watching Asuna walk away with a skip in her step while they had blank looks on their faces. Naruto began but trailed off at the end, not sure what to say. I know, Kirito replied, patting Naruto on the shoulder, not quite sure what he was agreeing with but agreeing nonetheless. I know. He finished walking after Asuna. With a sigh and a shake of his head, Naruto followed after his two party members. Kirito and Naruto were sitting at the table within the farmhouse having just finished eating the dinner that they had been able to prepare for themselves, Naruto including a few bowls of ramen. While Asuna enjoyed her much anticipated bath in the bathroom above them. Currently the two were discussing their plans for the next day, besides finding a blacksmith so that they could enhance Asuna's wind fleuret, and Kirito helping Naruto understand more things about the game. Why does this have to be so complicated? Naruto shouted, grabbing his hair in frustration. Kirito laughed a bit at Naruto's frustration with understanding some rules of the game before sparring him a smile. Don't worry about it, it sounds more complicated than it really is. He assured the blonde shinobi. Just don't think about it and play the game and it will all seem much easier. Kirito promised. If you say so, Naruto grumbled, his head resting on the table. Kirito was about to ask Naruto more about the elemental nations, curious to learn more about the other world that his friend was from, when Naruto suddenly stood up and walked towards the door. Where are you going? Kirito asked. Outside to train. Naruto answered. I need to clear my head. Okay, the black-clad swordsman replied, following Naruto outside, wanting to see what kind of training a shinobi went through in order to get stronger. Kirito was surprised though when he walked out of the house only to spot Naruto a few feet away from the door seemingly staring at nothing. What's up? Kirito asked curiously. Listen, Naruto said softly. Can't you hear that? Kirito stared at Naruto in confusion for a moment before he tried to listen to what Naruto was apparently hearing. It's faint, Kirito thought as he closed his eyes. But I think I can make something out in the distance. The black-haired swordsman finished opening up his eyes, just barely. Kirito said, answering Naruto's question. And wondering how the shinobi managed to hear it. Come on, let's go. Naruto instructed, taking off in a sprint. Kirito only hesitated for a little bit before he rushed after Naruto. The two soon came upon the scene of two people chasing after a third whose form was mostly hidden by a dark brown cloak that they were wearing. Are those ninjas? Kirito asked, looking at Naruto questioningly when he noticed the appearance of the two players chasing after the third. An annoyed scowl appeared on Naruto's face at the sight of the two ninjas, both of them dressed in black clothing and masks that covered a majority of their faces. Without saying a word, Naruto began running faster than before in a single bound the shinobi jumped above the two wannabe ninjas and landed between them and the player they had been chasing. I don't know what you bastards are trying to do. Naruto began pulling out a couple of kunai and holding one in each hand. But unless you want me to kick your asses, you'll leave right now. The blonde shinobi ordered. The two ninjas gave what Naruto assumed to be incredulous looks through their masks, about to completely ignore Naruto's suggestion when Kirito's voice came from behind them. If I were you, Kirito started, causing the two ninjas to swirl around to see the black-haired player standing with his sword at the ready. I would do as he says and leave. The two ninja cosplayers looked at each other unsurely before one decided to speak up. We're not leaving until that bitch tells us where the quest NPC we want is located. One ninja declared angrily. I'm not telling you anything. A female voice from behind Naruto declared. Her features were mostly obscured, but it was still clear that she was sticking out her tongue out at them. The two ninja bristled visibly at the declaration, but before they could do anything a kunai zipped by them, coming close to hitting one of them but missing by mere centimeters. The two instantly turned around to fight Naruto, but were completely caught off guard when Naruto appeared next to them, the other kunai he had pressed against one of them and his sword pressed against the other. Last chance, Naruto warned. Leave now. Why, you wouldn't dare, a ninja said somewhat fearfully. If Naruto even scratched them, his cursor would change colors and mark him as an orange player, a criminal within aim card. Wild T. Hey, we're going to force the female player to tell them where the quest NPC they would have stopped before their own cursors changed. You want to bet? Naruto threatened, moving the blades closer. A Fei. 10 seconds followed before one of them finally caved in. Okay, the man said. We'll go. He agreed, his companion nodding his head only a small bit as he did his best to keep his eyes on the blade pressed against his neck. The three players watched as the two ninjas left in a hurry before the cloaked female player turned her attention to the two who helped her. "Thanks for the save," the female player said gratefully. "Those two were being really annoying," she admitted before her stomach growled. "You wouldn't happen to have some food, would you?" the girl asked sheepishly while holding her stomach. Ellipsis. Kirito and Naruto watched as the girl who introduced herself as Argo wolfed down a few bowls of ramen that Naruto had placed in front of her along with anything else that she could get her hands on. "Just how many bowls of ramen do you have?" Kirito whispered to Naruto. "Enough," Naruto whispered back. Though eventually Naruto realized he would have to do something to come by food, seeing even his sealed supply of ramen wouldn't last forever. "Ah," the girl exclaimed in satisfaction, patting her full stomach. "That was delicious," she stated happily. Looking at her, Naruto on Ce more noticed her features starting from her brown eyes and curly auburn hair. She wore full body cloth and leather armor under her cloak. But what drew Naruto's attention the most was the painted whisker marks, 3 on each cheek. Though her whiskers made her look like a mouse instead of a fox. Naruto wasn't sure if he should feel insulted by the whisker marks or not. "Thanks for the food." "You're welcome," Kirito replied with a smile. "Do you mind telling us why those two guys were chasing you?" he asked her curiously. Argo hummed thoughtfully before answering. "Normally I'd charge people for information. But considering you two helped me, I'll let it slide this one time." She began. "Why would you charge us?" Naruto questioned her confusedly. Argo grinned cheekily at her fellow whisker-marked player. "I'm an information broker. If there is some information that you need, I can get it for you, for the right price," she informed them. As to why those guys were chasing me, Argo started before trailing off. "Do you have a bathroom?" the girl asked. "Yeah," Naruto replied, resisting the urge to face plant at the sudden change of topics. "Upstairs, second door on the right," he told her. Without a word, Argo stood up and made her way upstairs, leaving the two male players by themselves. "So what do you think those two ninjas wanted with her?" Kirito asked Naruto. Naruto let out a bit of a huff at having the other two players referred to as ninja, but didn't say anything in regards. "They said something about a quest NPC," Naruto reminded him. "Argo probably knows where they are, and the other two wanted the information so they could take it." Before Kirito could say something back, a couple of screams from upstairs drew their attention. We forgot that Asuna was in the bath." Kirito realized only to see Naruto already bounding up the stairs towards the source of the scream. "Hey, hold on a minute," the black-haired swordsman shouted. Naruto didn't hear a word that Kirito said as he had taken off towards the bathroom the moment he heard Asuna scream without a thought in his head. That's why when he reached the second floor he ran to the bathroom, passing an embarrassed Argo. Without stopping until he was at its door. "Asu!" Naruto shouted in concern, only to be cut off mid-sentence as a lot of bathroom supplies were thrown at him. Before Naruto's head was hit with something big and very hard, the shinobi caught the briefs of looks of creamy-colored skin that was barely hidden behind a white towel and Asuna's blushing cherry-red face. When Naruto woke up, he was lying on the couch with his cloak off, his head throbbing, and the others a few feet away. "What hit me?" the shinobi mumbled, holding his head. "It'd be easier to tell you what you weren't hit with," Kirito said with a smirk on his face. Once it was safe, Kirito had went to retrieve Naruto, and if he didn't know it was impossible, the beater would have sworn that the sink looked like it was almost pulled out. Naruto's eyes widened and his face turned a dark red as he remembered the last thing he saw before he was knocked out. Looking at the girl in question, Naruto noticed Asuna standing a feet away, her face still noticeably red as she gave him a pointed glare that he had seen before. "Did you see anything?" the hazel-eyed girl asked him lowly. Was Naruto oh so smart response. Asuna didn't let up on her glare in the least. Of course it was kind of ruined with the color her cheeks were currently in. Asuna repeated, stressing each word. Naruto's face turned a darker shade of red and he had to hold back the nosebleed that he was sure he was going to have because, though he would never admit it out loud, the image he saw of a naked Asuna with only a towel covering her modesty was an image that Naruto was not about to forget. "No," Naruto denied dishonestly, shaking his head wildly. Asuna narrowed her eyes slightly at the blonde, not believing his claim for a second but unable to do anything about it. Especially since she already knocked him unconscious when he entered the bathroom. Pervert, Asuna muttered, crossing her arms and turning her back on him in a huff. As anime tears streamed down Naruto's face at the accusation, Argo snickered a bit and drew the attention of the other 3 players in the room to her. Who would have thought that the hated Jinchu Yuriki would be so afraid of the wrath of a single girl? The information broker snickered, also to be knocked out by her. The 3 party members stared at the laughing girl. How do you know about Naruto being the Jinchuriki? Kirito was the one to eventually ask. Well, I saw it on the back of Naruto's coat. Argo told them, gesturing to the coat on the chair. The Jinchuriki with special powers is all that anyone that was part of the raid group is talking about right now, so it wasn't hard for me to learn about you. She claimed with a bit of pride in her voice. Of course they're also talking about the beater. Argo added, looking at Kirito. Okay, Naruto began. So now can you tell us what quest those guys were after? He asked. Argo looked at Naruto confused. Don't you know? She questioned him back. If you didn't take the quest, then how'd you get your whisker marks? These are birthmarks. Naruto replied with a bit of an annoyed look on his face. Really? Argo questioned. Once still looking a little doubtful as she reached out her hand towards his cheeks in order to rub them, only for her hand to be slapped away by Naruto. Fine, Argo said with a disappointed pout on her face before she began to explain. There is a quest on this floor near the southern edge. I call it the martial arts quest because the reward for completing it is a martial arts extra skill. ND in during the beta test, and now those ninjas and their guild want to know where it is. She told them. Kirito looked at the girl with a raised eyebrow. Isn't giving them information the whole point of an information broker? He asked. Argo shook her head patronizingly. For the right price, she told him chidingly. They want the information for free. The hazel-eyed girl realized that something was missing from Argo's explanation. But what about the whiskers? Asuna asked, noting that the cloak-wearing girl hadn't explained that. Argo nodded in acknowledgement of Asuna's question. The quest NPC paints these whisker marks at the beginning when you accept the quest. She explained. I thought because Naruto had whiskers that he had already accepted the quest. She told them honestly. Martial arts skill. Naruto repeated, his interest piqued. That could be useful, Kirito agreed. So how much will it cost us for you to tell us where the NPC is? He asked. Argo waved the questio off as she smiled at the 3 other players. Don't worry about it, she said. Consider this a freebie for helping me. I told one of you the reason why I was being chased. Argo said, pointing at Naruto before pointing to Kirito. And I'll tell you where you can find the quest NPC. She promised as she proceeded to tell them exactly where the martial arts quest NPC was. When Naruto, Kirito, and Asuna set out the next day, it was the blonde shinobi who immediately noticed that someone was missing. Where's Argo? Naruto asked Asuna, since she and the missing information broker had shared a room the previous night. She set out early. Asuna answered. She said she might see us later. Naruto and Kirito nodded their heads in understanding. Okay, Kirito began. First off, we should head off NTO town and see if we can get a blacksmith to enhance Asuna's wind fleuret. He decided, with Naruto and especially Asuna agreeing with his plan. Then we can head to the southern edge of the floor too. Where Argo said the martial art quest NPC is supposed to be. Alright, let's go. Naruto cheered, drawing smiles from both Kirito and Asuna. Ellipsis. Walking into Urbis, the 3 immediately began to search for a blacksmith NPC within the main city on the 2nd floor. Sadly, they found out, and what Kirito recognized as an original part of the beta test, that there were no blacksmith NPC in the entire sea. Tai and Kirito then told them that there wouldn't be any on the entire floor. So what do we do? Asuna asked, a little disheartened that she wouldn't be able to enhance her newly acquired wind fleuret like she originally planned. I don't know, Kirito replied as he tried to think of something. What about that Neja guy? Naruto said, remembering the player from the other day that they saw that looked like was a blacksmith. That's right, Kirito said, snapping his fingers recognition. I'd forgotten about him. With his small contest with Asuna and then meeting and helping save Argo the other end. The homely looking player had slipped the swordsman's mind. Let's go, Asuna said enthusiastically, heading out toward where she remembered Neja's small shop was located. Sadly, there briefly Ren, EWED hoped was dashed away rather quickly when they found their way back to where they had spotted Neja and found the spot empty. He's not here, Naruto pointed out obviously as he looked around hoping to spot the player somewhere nearby. Maybe he just moved to another spot, Asuna suggested hopefully. Maybe, Kirito agreed. We should look around and see if we can find out anything. We can meet up back here in an hour, he suggested, Asuna and Naruto nodding their heads in agreement before the three players went their separate ways in order to gather information. An hour later, Kirito and Naruto were waiting for Asuna to return, the two of them having already let the other know that they failed to find anything. Naruto didn't share with Kirito that a good amount of the players he tried talking to glared, insulted, and/or ignored him completely. Where is she? Naruto wondered. Calm down, I'm sure that she'll be here soon, Kirito told Naruto, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed in front of him. Being far more patient than the blonde shinobi, as he watched said shinobi pace in front of him. Just as he finished assuring Naruto, Kirito spotted something out of the corner of his eyes. Look, here she comes now, the black-haired swordsman stated. Spinning around, Naruto saw Asuna running towards them with a pleased smile on her face. Coming to a stop in front of them as Una's smile became all that much brighter, proud at her accomplishment, especially when it became obvious that Naruto and Kirito failed to learn anything. I found where Neja went, another player told me that he moved his shop a city further south from here. Asuna told them, so we just head south and have him enhance your wind fleuret, Naruto decided. Plus we were already going to head in that direction for the martial arts quest, so this works in our favor, Kirito added in before a frown crossed his face. The only problem is that there are a couple of villages to the south of Urbis. Do why? Oh, you know which one it was that Neja was heading to? The swordsman asked, directing his question to Asuna. The hazel-eyed girl furrowed her brows in thought as she tried to remember if the specific toe and that Neja as moving his shop to was mentioned, but eventually she shook her head. No, Asuna answered. That's fine, Kirito assured the other two. He's either gone to Terran or Marom, we'll just have to search both cities to find him. I can create a couple of clones and have them search the towns, Naruto offered. If they find him they'll dispel and whatever they learned will transfer back to me, he said helpfully. That's a very useful ability, Kirito said somewhat enviously. He could only imagine how many things he could get done if he could make copies of himself that would then transfer all their knowledge back to him. He could have one of them do his homework while he played video games all day. That's the dream, Kirito thought before a frown crossed his face. At least it was, the swordsman realized once he realized that he had been trapped in a video game. But will that really work? Asuna asked. She had been feeling a little guilty for all the time that Naruto and Kirito were spending just to help her enhance her wind fleuret, so she honestly hoped that Naruto's clones did work so that they could focus on something else for a while the clones searched for Neja. Yup, Naruto replied. My clones can do anything I can. Their only weakness is that one good hit dispels them, but no regular monster is fast enough to hit them, and as long as no players attack them while in the city they'll be fine, he assured them. Alright then, Asuna said far more confidently, and a smile back on her face. Then your shadow clones can handle that while we go complete the martial arts quest, she decided. Right, Naruto agreed, bringing his hands together in a cross-hand seal, about to summon a couple of clones only to be stopped by Kirito. How about, Kirito began putting a hand on Naruto's shoulder. We wait until we leave Urbis before you create your clones, Naruto, he suggested as he spared a look at all the other players around them. While people knew that Naruto had abilities and more learning about him every minute, Kirito still thought it was a good idea to keep as much of what Naruto could do a secret for as long as possible. Naruto and Asuna looked around and noticed some of the nasty looks a few players were sending Naruto. Right, Naruto agreed once more, seeing how he was being looked at. Journeying out of Urbis was simple enough. With their combined strength, Naruto, Kirito, and Asuna made short work of most of the monsters that they came across, making sure to cover each other so that at no point they were overwhelmed. Naruto burst Oot laughing when they came across a trembling cow, finding the monster hilarious to look at, drawing a giggle from Asuna and a chuckle from Kirito. Naruto made sure to create a couple of shadow clones. Once they were a good distance away from Urbis, with Kirito pointing them in the general direction of where they'd have to go in order to reach the villages of Terran or Marom. Following Argo's directly, the three headed south towards the highest mountain that they could see, knowing that at its summit they would find a hut where the quest NPC lived. "What's wrong, Naruto?" Asuna asked the cerulean Yed-teen after a while, and noticing how the blonde shinobi seemed to be fidgeting, drawing the attention of Kirito at the same time. "It's nothing," Naruto replied dismissively. "Just not used to traveling so slow," he finished. They had been walking at a leisurely pace since they left Urbis, and for a shinobi who was used to jumping through the trees and running across the land, this pace was nearly unbearable for Naruto. Sadly, that wasn't the only thing that bothered Naruto about being stuck within Sao. "Guess you never took the time to stop and smell the flowers, huh?" Kirito questioned. "Nope," Naruto answered. Since he became a shinobi, his life had been filled with training, getting stronger, saving villages, countries, princesses, and the world. Whatever time off he did get was usually spent training. "Besides, why would I want to spend my time smelling flowers?" he asked obliviously. "Yeah, it's just an expression," Kirito said with an awkward smile. "Oh." Asuna giggled at the interaction between her two male party members. Ellipsis. At the foot of the tallest mountain that the three players could find on the southern edge of the second floor, the three players each looked up at the tip with slightly slack-jawed expressions on their faces at how tall the mountain was. "We're supposed to climb that," Kirito muttered loud enough for the other two to hear. "That'll take all day to climb," he guessed before turning to face Naruto and Asuna. "Maybe we should just head back and find Neja," the black-haired player suggested. On the way to the mountain, one of Naruto's clones had dispelled, letting the blonde shinobi know that Neja was in Terran village. Naruto then created another clone and sent it to Terran in order to keep tabs on Neja. Asuna refused, shaking her head in disagreement. "We'd have to come back and climb it eventually, might as well get it over with now," she countered. "Good point," Kirito relented with a sigh. "Alight," Naruto cheered. "Then what are we waiting for?" He asked no one in particular as he brought his hands up in a hand seal that had by now become familiar to Kirito and Asuna. "Shadow Clone Jutsu." "What are you?" Kirito started, only to let out a yell of surprise when Naruto's clone picked him up and carried him on his back. "Let's go," Naruto shouted, carrying a blushing Asuna in his arms, before he and his clone channeled chakra into their FET and began to run up the side of the mountain. Several feet up, wind wasps started to spawn above the three players and dove down at them. "Now what?" Kirito yelled over the rushing wind as he looked at monsters that were closing in, his hands twitching to the sword on his back. "What do you think?" Naruto's clone replied. Kirito looked back at the ground with a nervous and fearful look on his face before turning his attention to the wind wasps. "Just don't drop me," the black-haired swordsman pleaded, loosening the tight hold he had on Naruto in order to draw his sword anneal blade. "No promises," the clone answered jokingly, causing Kirito to mutter incomprehensibly under his breath. "Ready, Asuna?" Naruto asked his passenger, shifting his hold on her so that he held her by the waist, intentionally having her body pressed against his. "Ready," Asuna replied as steadily as possible, drawing her rapier as smoothly as she could, doing her best to ignore the feeling caused by herself being pressed against Naruto. Without even slowing down for a second, the temporary group of four blew past the wind wasps, the monsters shattering seconds after they were past. For the next several minutes, Naruto, Kirito, and Asuna climbed up the mountain, dashing past any monsters that spawned in front of them, those that proved too close to ignore being destroyed by the later duo. Eventually, thanks to Naruto, a climb to reach the summit of the mountain, which should have taken at the very least a few hours to reach, was completed in minutes. "Okay," Kirito began, after the clone that had been carrying him dispersed. "While that was really helpful, please don't ever do that again," the swordsman pleaded. Throughout most of the climb, Kirito was fearful that at some point Naruto's clone would drop him accidentally. Or if not, that one of the monsters might slip past him and hit the clone, dispelling it. Naruto merely grinned at Kirito in response. "You don't hear Asuna complaining," the blonde shinobi pointed out. In response, Asuna bopped Naruto on top of his head. "Don't do anything that dangerous again," she scolded him tiredly. Naruto's grin turned sheepish in response. Asuna tilde. The blonde whined half-heartedly, rubbing the back of his head while appreciating the fact that Asuna didn't hit him nearly as hard as Sakura would have. Of course, few people could hit as hard as Sakura. Looking around, the three players noticed a small hut a short distance away, and someone leaning against the wall of the hut. "Yo," Argo greeted the three once they were close enough. "Looks like you made it," she pointed out obviously. "But how?" the whisker-marked girl asked curiously, having seen the three appear on the side of the mountain, with a clone of Naruto's carrying Kirito. "How'd you get here so fast?" Naruto asked instead while pointing at the auburn-haired girl stupefied. Argo grinned cheekily back at Naruto. "Secret," she replied, "unless you'd like to pay for the information." She added, "No thanks." Naruto deadpanned. "Ah, you're no fun, Naruto." Argo bemoaned. "Then how about letting me rub your whiskers?" she offered, reaching out her hand towards him. "No," Naruto answered, smacking her hand away. "Come on," Argo insisted. "I'll let you touch mine if you let me touch yours." The information broker proposed once more, reaching her hand out towards Naruto only to have it smacked away again. "Why do you want to touch his whiskers so much?" Asuna asked curiously. Argo's eyes glinted as she answered Asuna's question. "My whiskers are painted on." Argo started, "But his are real. I want to see if I rub them if Naruto will start to purr, like a cat," she explained before throwing her arm around Asuna's shoulder and bringing her close. "Don't you want to see that for yourself, Ah-chan?" Argo questioned with a sly smile on his face. Asuna actually considered it and couldn't help become curious herself, silently thinking it would be adorable to see Naruto purr. Not icing the intense looks that both girls were now sending him, Naruto became slightly nervous. "Hey," the shinobi began. "These are birthmarks, so why would I purr? Besides, I'd be more like a fox than a cat," Naruto reasoned. "And foxes don't purr, right?" He finished, looking at Kirito questioningly, who shrugged his shoulders, not knowing the answer to the question himself. "We'll see," Argo said, as she withdrew her arm from around Asuna. Letting the matter drop for now. "So you three ready to take the martial arts quest?" she asked, looking at the three players eagerly. While Kirito and Naruto nodded their heads in confirmation, Asuna shook hers, indicating that she wouldn't be taking the quest and drawing curious looks from the other three players. "This doesn't seem like the thing for me," Asuna explained. "So I think I'll just sit this one out and just watch from the sidelines," she told them. "Are you sure?" Naruto asked her carefully. Asuna nodded her head, sparing Naruto a small smile. "Yup. Hand-to-hand seems more like your thing. I'd rather stick with my rapier," Asuna said, placing a hand on her wind fleuret. "All right then," Argo said, clapping her hands and drawing the three players' attention back to her. "If that's settled, let's get the quest started," she said excitedly. In all honesty, she was looking forward to what Kirito looked like with whiskers. She'd also be interested in how Naruto would look like with the whiskers that the quest gave him, but considering that he already had whiskers, she didn't really have anything to look forward to. Naruto was the one to knock. On the door as Kirito and him stepped forward while the girls hung back a bit. The door was opened by a male NPC with short cropped black hair, sleeveless gray shirt and brown pants. His skin was lightly tanned and highly defined muscles on his arms. The NPC gave them a pleasant smile. "Greetings, you must be really strong to have climbed all the way to the top of this mountain," the NPC said, completely unaware that Naruto, Kirito, and Asuna had technically cheated and taken a shortcut to get to the summit of the mountain. "Are you possibly here to learn the secret behind my fighting technique?" the NPC questioned. Transparent screens appeared in front of Kirito and Naruto before both male players pressed the button to indicate that they would be accepting the quest. "Very well, follow me," the NPC instructed as he walked out of his own hut and proceeded to lead the four around the back. Walking around the hut, the players came upon the sight of two giant boulders in an open space. "In order to learn my technique, you must split these boulders in half by using the palms of your hands," the NPC explained before pulling out a small jar of paint from behind his back. "But first," he continued, as he quickly painted a set of whisker marks on both their cheeks similar to the ones on Argo's face, 3 whiskers on each cheek. "Now you may begin." The man finished before proceeding to walk back into his hut. Asuna and Argo took a moment to take in the addition to whiskers to the male players' faces, while Kirito and Naruto looked at each other. The paint on Naruto was hardly noticeable as the painted whiskers were directly over Naruto's own, giving them only a slightly thicker appearance at the beginning. The whisker marks that Kirito sported were far more noticeable, like Arg. Oh, he had 3 on each cheek for a total of 6 that were colored a dark brown. So how do I look? Kirito asked nervously with a forced smile on his face. While he had known about the whiskers being painted on whichever player accepted the martial arts quest, he wasn't aware of what he would be required to do, and looking at the size of the boulder, the beater was worried if he'd be able to complete the quest or not. For a moment Naruto, Asuna, and Argo were silent as they stared at Kirito, but that silence was soon shattered when both Naruto and Argo couldn't hold back their laughter any longer and burst out laughing at Kirito's expense. Even Asuna found herself giggling a little at Kirito's appearance. Argo was holding her gut as she responded to Kirito's question, why you look like Doraemon, Kiribo. The information broker exclaimed between laughs as she pointed at the dark-eyed swordsman, Kirimon. She finished by mixing the 2 names together. Great, Kirito muttered, his eyebrow twitching in annoyance. He had been hoping that even if he had failed to complete the quest, that at the very least no one would notice he had whiskers, or that they made him look cooler. No such luck, Kirito thought before a determined glint appeared in his eyes. Guess I'll just to complete this quest no matter what. Without even thinking about it, Naruto brought up his second screen, the search engine screen. And he typed in the name Doraemon to see what Argo was talking about. What he saw was a cat-like creature that was mostly blue with white face, belly, hands, and feet. Seeing the creature and moving the screen so that it hovered in front of Kirito, Naruto soon burst out laughing once more as he noticed a faint resemblance between the 2. Argo stopped laughing the moment that Naruto brought up the screen, her eyes fixated solely on the screen before she spun around, switching her focus to Naruto. How did you do that? She asked, her eyes shining with unbridled curiosity. Kirito face palmed at how careless Naruto was at revealing that ability. Considering how a lot of players already had a low opinion of Naruto, he really didn't need anything that would set him apart in the eyes of the other players. Well, it's not like we decided to keep that a secret, Kirito rationalized. Argo was at Naruto's side in an instant, looking at the screen as best she could from over his shoulder. How did you do that? She asked once more, repeating her question from before. Naruto looked at the girl strangely for a moment as he tried to come up with something to say. I don't know, he replied rather lamely, not sounding like he believed it himself, and from the look that Argo was giving him, she didn't either. Right, Argo dragged out sarcastically. Come on, tell me, the auburn-haired girl pressed. What do you want in return? The location of a rare item. A quest with a lot of experience or call? Argo asked, each time she asked a question moving closer to Naruto. My 3 sizes, she finished in a sultry whisper as she pushed herself against Naruto, causing the shinobi's face to turn a dark shade of red. What? Naruto gasped out in shock. Argo wasn't nearly as quite her last suggestion as she thought she was, because suddenly Asuna was between the 2, pushing Naruto and Argo away from each other, an annoyed look on her face. Hey, stop messing around, Asuna told them, though her words seemed to be more directed towards Naruto as she was looking straight at him while giving him a mild glare. You have a quest to complete, remember, Naruto? She reminded them. All right, Naruto agreed, but Asuna turned away from him in a huff for some reason that the shinobi didn't understand. Argo backed away, laughing lightly. I was just kidding anyway, Argo claimed, waving her hands in front of her dismissively. Though I'd really like to know how you did that, the information broker added, silently promising herself that she would get that information out of Naruto. Naruto ignored the information broker as he turned to face the boulders along with Kirito, who had been looking intently at the boulders since Argo started to get information on the search screen out of Naruto. So what do you think? Naruto asked Kirito. I'm not sure, Kirito began, looking at the 2 boulders carefully. We might be able to do it with our bare hands, but I don't know, it looks impossible, he freely admitted with a shrug of his shoulders. Naruto hummed, tilting his head to the side for a moment in thought before walking up to one of the giant boulders. Stopping right in front T of the boulder. Naruto lifted a single hand before thrusting it forward and causing impact with the hard surface. Kirito, Asuna, and Argo watched their jaws almost dropping in shock as the boulder at Naruto had just punched shattered from that one blow. Turning around to face the three, Naruto had a fox-like grin on his face. That wasn't so hard, he stated almost dismissively. But how? Kirito muttered in disbelief before he regained his composure and shook his head as he realized that what Naruto had just done probably had a lot to do with him being a shinobi. Seriously man, that's almost unfair. He remarked, though his words lacked any sort of negativity and he honestly sounded more amused than anything else. That was amazing. Asuna stated, much more enthusiastic at Naruto's display. You think so? Naruto asked sheepishly as he scratched the back of his head, a little embarrassed by the hazel-eyed girl's praise. Kirito rolled his eyes as he watched Naruto and Asuna interact for a bit. The two momentarily lost in their own little world as they talked about what Naruto just did. Okay, Kirito muttered to himself, turning to face the boulder. My turn then. He said out loud. More to himself than the others, but he still managed to draw their attention back to him. The swordsman closed his eyes as he took several deep breaths as he took a stance, one hand in front of his palm open with the other pulled back close to his body. A moment passed before Kirito's eyes snapped open and he thrust his arm forward, hitting the boulder. Ha! Kirito shouted the instant that his hand made contact with the boulder. Nothing happened. Behind everyone a crow flew by. Aho, aho, aho. Okay, so this isn't going to be easy. Kirito remarked rather lamely as he turned to look at the others with an awkward expression on his face. Naruto held back a snort as he tried to keep from laughing. Asuna elbowing him the gut helped with that, as Argo gave him a look that was filled with sympathy. I understand, she empathized. I couldn't complete the quest, that thing is like an immortal object. I was stuck with these whiskers for the entire beta. Argo revealed. Kirito nodded his head in understanding, though he became increasingly concerned with whether he'd be stuck with the whisker marks for the rest of their stint within the game. I'll just have to try again, Kirito decided, turning back around and getting ready to punch the boulder. Naruto, Asuna, and Argo sat back and watched Kirito punch the boulder again and again. This might take a while, the blonde shinobi remarked offhandedly. Ellipsis. Several hours later the sun had already begun to set and the three players were still watching Kirito strike at the boulder with very little, none really, progress. Okay, Kirito Bega. And as he took a seat on the ground across from the others as he took a small break. This is seriously unfair, the black-haired swordsman complained. You were able to split that rock with one blow and I've been at this all day and haven't done anything to it. The black-clad player stated, sounding the smallest bit jealous as he gazed at Naruto. The blonde player scratched the back of his head. Sorry. Naruto apologized uncomfortably. Kirito let out a sigh before waving off Naruto's apology. Don't worry about it, I'll get this eventually, Kirito assured both Naruto and himself. I don't want to be stuck with these whiskers for the rest of the game after all. He added, rubbing at the whiskers with the back of his left hand, almost hoping that the action would remove the whiskers. What's that supposed to mean? Both Naruto and Argo demanded of the self-imposed beater. Nothing, I swear, Kirito said rather hastily, shaking his arms in front of him, feeling a sense of relief once the two stopped glaring at him. Anyway, we should figure out what we're going to do from this point. It's obvious that I'm not going to get this today and we still need to get to Terran before we lose track of Neja. The blacksmith, Argo questioned. Yeah, Asuna confirmed before tilting her head in confusion. How did you know that? She asked, sure that she and none of the others had mentioned T. He blacksmith since meeting up with the information broker. Yufufufu, I gather information, of course I'm going to know about the first ever blacksmith in Aincard. Argo told Asuna, waving her finger in mock disapproval. The other players nodded their heads in understanding before Kirito continued, if we leave now we can probably reach Terran right before sunset. Then tomorrow we can come back, or I can come back on my own since only I have to complete the quest. Kirito offered. Naruto rolled his eyes a bit at Kirito's self-sacrificing attitude. We don't need to split up. Naruto rejected. We can go back to Terran, have Neja enhance Asuna's wind florette and then come back. The shinobi countered. Asuna nodded her head in agreement. I like Naruto's idea, Asuna announced. There's no point in us having to split up when we don't have to, she decided. Kirito stared at his two party members before a small smile appeared on his face. Okay, then we should get going then if we do want to reach Terran before dark, Kirito said as he got to his feet, the others copying his actions. Argo spoke up next, drawing the three's attention to her. I think we'll separate here, Argo told them. I have my own things to take care of, so I should get going, the auburn-haired girl announced. The group said their goodbyes to Argo before Naruto took a hold of Kirito and Asuna and jumped off the mountain's edge. To the screaming of the two players he was carrying, Argo rushed over to the summit's edge with wide eyes, only for them to widen more when she saw Naruto actually running down the side of the mountain. After a few moments, Argo's look of surprise changed back to normal with a sly smile crossing her features. You are really interesting, Naruto, Argo said out loud to no one. Seriously, Naruto, you could have given me a heart attack jumping off the mountain like that, Kirito muttered as he, Naruto, and Asuna walked into Terran. You're fine, Naruto replied, waving off Kirito's complaint, only to be smacked over the head by Asuna, who had an annoyed look on her face as she tried to straighten out her hair from the mess it was in. We are not fine, Asuna said, stressing out the last word. She couldn't help but think that it was excessively cruel of Kayaba that besides trapping everyone in Sao, he still made it possible for female players to experience bad hair days. Never do that again. Fine, Naruto grumbled. Honestly, the shinobi didn't understand what the two were complaining about. It's not like they were in any danger while they were going down. A bit of chakra made sure that Naruto wouldn't lose his hold on them. Okay, so where is Neja? Kirito asked, turning to look at Naruto expectantly since his clone was tailing the blacksmith. Naruto opened his mouth to answer, "Ha." Ving dispelled his clone once they entered the town, only to be cut off by Asuna. Before that, the hazel-eyed girl said, "It's time you paid up for losing our bet, Kirito," she told him as Kirito paled a little. Bet? Kirito repeated. What bet? He asked, trying to feign ignorance. A frown crossed Asuna's face as she closed in on Kirito until her face was right in front of his. You're not trying to get out of our bet, are you, Kirito? She asked, a threatening edge in her voice. Oh, of course not, Asuna. Kirito replied with a small nervous smile, a bead of sweat going down his face as he tried to placate the female player. Good, Asuna said, giving the black-haired teen a dazzling smile, her personality doing what appeared to be a 180 since she seemed far more cheerful than she was a second ago, as she stepped back from Kirito. Let's go. She finished, cheerfully spinning around, reaching out and taking Naruto's hand in hers, and began to walk away. Kirito let out a relieved breath the moment that Asuna began to leave, dragging Naruto behind her. Man, she can be scary when she wants to be, Kirito muttered to himself under his breath. Hopefully whatever she plans on buying won't be too expensive, he hoped as he scratched the back of his head before he began to follow his two party members. Sadly for Kirito, his hopes would soon be dashed away. Ellipsis. So how did you learn about this place? Kirito inquired of Asuna as the three party members sat within a restaurant waiting for the dessert that Asuna ordered to arrive. Asuna had been humming happily, eagerly waiting for the dessert tea that she had ordered before answering Kirito's question. Argo told me about it, the orange-brown-haired girl answered. She said it was an apology for walking in on me the other night. Asuna Fini shed her cheeks, coloring slightly as she glanced towards Naruto, remembering that Argo hadn't been the only one that had accidentally walked in on her. Naruto's own cheeks colored slightly as he recalled what happened, gulping nervously seconds later when Asuna began to glare at him. The shinobi was silently thankful when the hazel-eyed girl stopped soon after. Right, Kirito mumbled, enjoying the lit byplay that happened between Naruto and Asuna. Kirito would admit that he thought Asuna was beautiful, but he definitely wouldn't want to be in Naruto's place just to get a glimpse for a second of something more. Kirito blinked in confusion a moment later when Asuna's eyes seemed to sparkle as she stared at something over his shoulder while Naruto was drooling a little in his seat beside the female player. Looking over his shoulder, Kirito saw a chef bringing over the dessert that Asuna had ordered, the most expensive item on the menu, Kirito remembered, and the beater had to keep himself from drooling as well at the sight of it. A cake was placed down on the table in between the three. That looks delicious, Kirito said, gulping hungrily. Ellipsis. That was so good Tilda. Asuna said with dreamy sigh. Her hands clasped in front of her face. Naruto agreed wholeheartedly, almost as good as ramen. While the cake had been delicious, it could never compare to ramen in the shinobi's mind. Duh. Finitely beat anything here during the beta. Kirito added, though he wasn't thrilled about how the cake was divided. Asuna was the one who decided how the cake was split between the three. The chest knew. Tea-haired girl giving herself half of the cake, Naruto received a little more than half of what remained, and Kirito got the smallest piece of the three. Though it's a lot better than what she was originally going to give us. Kirito rationalized as Asuna had first attempted to keep most of the cake for herself while only giving small slices to the two male players. Naruto's marginally larger than Kirito's. And also this, luck plus, definitely wasn't around during the beta. Though it only lasts 15 minutes. He finished looking up to the plus symbol by his name that was counting down. Asuna seemed to snap out of her daze as she glanced at the countdown next to her own name before her eyes seemed to widen. Then we have to hurry and enhance my wind fleuret. The girl said, placing a 10-dur hand on her rapier before taking Naruto's hand in her other one and tried to hurry the blonde along. Come on, let's go, she insisted, taking off in a rush. Hey, hold on, Kirito called out. Asuna, you don't know where Neja is. He tried to point out as he followed the pair since Asuna was still dragging Naruto along instead of allowing the blonde shinobi to lead. In the back of his mind, Kirito had a faint sense of déjà vu to when they first arrived in Urbis. A few minutes later the trio was finally approaching where Neja had set up shop, once Asuna had let Naruto actually lead them to where he knew Neja was instead of just running through the city randomly. Like before, Neja's shop was rather simple except that he had a couple of swords on display on one side of his anvil and on the other was a small forge. The moment that Asuna spotted Neja, she started to speed up with an excited smile on her face. Just 15 minutes, the hazel-eyed girl murmured before coming to a stop right in front of Neja. Hey. Neja looked at Asuna, slightly surprised by her sudden appearance. Why yes? He asked just as Naruto followed by Kirito arrived. Do you want to buy something? Or something repaired? I have some really good daggers. You didn't have to run. Kirito told Asuna, we have plenty of time. Close by, a clock tower, with a digital clock floating above it, showed that it just turned 7. Asuna completely ignored Kirito's comment as she was completely focused on Neja as she drew her rapier. I want to enhance this. Asuna stated clearly, holding the weapon out to him. I've collected a whole bunch of wind wasp needles. She finished. Neja lowered his head seemingly in thought, his face shadowed by his hair so that the look that appeared in his eyes when he spotted Asuna's rapier was missed by the others. Oh okay, request accepted. Neja said, taking the rapier from Asuna. Now then, let's start. For a moment the three players were distracted when Neja ignited the forge. The flames quickly lighting up the dark surrounding area. They watched silently as Neja took the now glowing rapier and placed it on the anvil before bringing a small iron hammer on it. Asuna flinched a little at the first strike, something that wasn't missed by either Naruto or Kirito. Hey, it's going to be okay, Naruto said, trying to reassure the orange-brown-haired player from where he stood to her left. You've done everything you could, Kirito added from Asuna's right. With the luck pulse, there is a 95% success rate, so it'll be fine. Asuna gave the barest hint of nodding her head to indicate that she did hear what Kirito said. A second passed before Asuna tentatively reached out to her left hand and took Naruto's hand in hers. Naruto looked at Asuna slightly taken by surprise at her grabbing his hand. For the last couple of days they've held hands a few times, but that was mostly to lead to others in some random direction. This, Naruto realized, was somehow different from those times. They weren't rushing off somewhere in excitement without thinking about what they were doing. Naruto could see it clearly, despite the brave front that Asuna was trying to put forward to hide how nervous she actually was. Taking Asuna's hand more firmly in his, Naruto squeezed it as a sign of reassurance and comfort. It'll be okay, Naruto repeated again softly. Yeah, it's going to be fine. Asuna agreed. Even if it fails it won't break, right? She asked the group's most knowledgeable player. Kirito nodded his head once in confirmation. Yeah, right now it's at +4, right? At worst it will downgrade it to +3. The beater said. So it's not like it breaking could ever happen. Ping. The sound rang almost deafeningly to the three players, none more than Asuna. Yes, were fixated on the wind fleuret that lay on the anvil, now broken in two halves before shattering completely. Asuna's eyes were wide, disbelieving, her expression almost broken. The girl looking Lee. She might collapse at any moment if Naruto hadn't put his arms around her to keep her up. I'm sorry. Neja shouted, bowing to the trio. I'll give you a full refund. I am so sorry. He apologized. It took a moment, but Kirito eventually was able to snap out of his stupor. Hey, hold on. The black-haired player snapped furiously. What the hell is going on? The penalty for enhancement failure is at worst -1. So how did this happen? Kirito demanded. It's a new penalty that could have been added to the game. Something like this happened once before. Neja admitted nervously. I'm sorry. He apologized once more. Ellipsis. The trio walked silently through the streets of Terran on their way to a local inn. Kirito led the way with Naruto following him, as the shinobi gently pulled Asuna behind him. The hazel-eyed girl hadn't said a word since she watched her wind fleuret be destroyed, and Naruto was genuinely concerned about her since her nearly broken expression hadn't changed since then either. Getting 3 rooms from the innkeeper NPC, the 3 players headed up to their rooms. Asuna was the first to enter her room with Naruto and Kirito watching after her. Both male players wanted to say something to her. Something that could comfort her after losing her treasured wind fleuret, but they both knew that anything they could say would come out sounding hollow. Asuna only spared them a tearful glance before the door closed behind them. Let's go, Naruto said, leaving no room for argument in his voice. Where? Kirito asked, though he had a good idea of where. Naruto didn't look back at Kirito, walking towards the exit. As he answered, to find Neja. The shinobi stated. With Kurama, Naruto was able to sense the negative emotions in others, but his instincts cultivated with his upbringing told him when something wrong. Ellipsis. Naruto and Kirito stood around a corner in an alley from where Neja was located. The two were spying on Neja, trying to find some clue as to what happened. While the blacksmith was enhancing Asuna's wind fleuret. Sadly, at the moment all their spying had resulted in nothing at the moment. Suddenly Naruto's hand snapped up and looked like he was trying to get a hold of something in midair. What are? Kirito began to ask but stopped mid-sentence. Naruto no fair, Argo's voice came out of nowhere before the auburn-haired girl appeared out of thin air. Her hand dangerously close to his whisker marks. I was so close. The information broker whined childishly. How do you know I was there? She asked. You can't sneak up on a ninja. Naruto returned with his fox-like grin. Kirito rolled his eyes a bit before he looked around the corner of the building they were hiding behind to make sure that Neja, and whoever else he might be with, hadn't heard them. When he saw that Neja was still oblivious to their presence, busy dealing with another player, Kirito turned his attention back to Argo. It's good you got here so quick, Argo. Now do you have the information we asked about? Kirito asked the auburn-haired girl. So serious, Kirito, Argo remarked with a grin on her face before becoming deadly serious. But it's just like Naruto and Kirito sensed that in a short amount of time there have been 7 different cases like the one you two told me about. This isn't a coincidence, Argo revealed. All cases involved high-level players that lead the frontlines losing rare weapons. And this guy is involved, Naruto stated with a scowl as he glanced over at Neja, not a single doubt in his mind that the blacksmith was somehow involved with everything that was going on. But what would be the point? Kirito asked. They'd just be reducing our overall strength. Our chances of ever getting back to the real world are just getting farther away. He said, trying to make sense of why someone would do something that would make things more difficult for them. Besides that, he also felt anger for his friend also being a victim of this scam. Argo shrugged her shoulders. They might not have any other reason than to collect rare weapons. She answered. It improves their own chances of survival, and if they have to, they can sell whatever they steal for a good price. Naruto stopped glaring at Neja, the player having broken into a sweat that he didn't know the cause behind, to look at Argo curiously. But isn't there some way to keep players from stealing from one another? He asked. Argo nodded her head in response. Even though that is true, there are some imperfections that could be taken advantage of if a player knows about it. She said thoughtfully. The beater raised an eyebrow curiously. Imperfection? Kirito repeated. You mean a bug? Why hasn't it been fixed? The auburn-haired girl shrugged her shoulders once more. Though this is not the beta, not all bugs can be expected to have been fixed in SAO. The administrators could have also purposely made it a part of the game. Argo explained the best she could with the information that she managed to gather. If people are stealing rare weapons, then Asuna's wind fleuret wasn't destroyed. Naruto said. Then what was it that we saw destroyed? A fake, Kirito realized. At some point Asuna's weapon was switched out with a fake, but when? Was there any point when it was being reinforced that it could have been switched? Argo questioned the two male players. After it was handed over. When everyone's eyes were off it, even if for just a second. She pressed. Both boys were deep in thought, trying to think of a moment when they took their eyes off the rapier. Something that both were having trouble coming up with, since the three of them were very excited as they watched Neja work and hardly spared a moment to look away. After a couple of seconds both had an epiphany as they remembered the same thing at the exact same time. The forge, Naruto and Kirito said at the same time. Okay, Naruto continued. So we figured all this out, but what about Asuna? What about her wind fleuret? How do we get it back? He asked. A very real and very big part of Naruto wanted to do nothing more than walk over to Neja right then and there and beat the shit out of him until he returned Asuna's wind fleuret. Kirito was deep in thought when his eyes suddenly widened. Looking around wildly for a moment, Kirito spotted the clock tower that showed it was only a few minutes till 8. We have to go, he said in a hurry, barely taking enough time to transfer some call to Argo before taking off. Naruto was a bit caught off guard but followed after Kirito, making Rita transfer his half of the payment to Argo as he went. Catching up with the running swordsman, Naruto tried to get his attention. Kirito, what is it? Naruto questioned the gamer. I think I know a way to get Asuna's wind fleuret back, but if we don't hurry it'll be too late. Kirito said, not willing to slow down in the slightest to answer Naruto's question. The veteran player was caught off guard when he felt himself get picked up and suddenly moving far faster than he was before. Then we can't waste any time, Naruto shouted, sprinting down the street, little more than a blur to most players. Behind them Argo let out a huff, crossing her arms under her chest, at being left like that by the two male players without even a proper goodbye. Ellipsis. Asuna lay in her bed trying to figure out what she was going to do. The simple answer was to get another rapier. She already had a few spares that she bought from the weapon shop the other day. Only it wasn't that simple. I'm being ridiculous, Asuna thought to herself, but despite what Asuna told herself, and how hard she tried to shake off how hollow and hopeless she felt since losing her wind fleuret, she just couldn't. Closing her eyes, Asuna made a poor intent at falling asleep. Though the moment she closed her eyes, Asuna's mind was filled with images of herself falling behind Naruto and Kirito, her rapier breaking as she was forced to watch as the two people closest to her in SAO move on ahead without her. For a moment, Asuna imagined, Naruto looked like he'd stop and wait for her, and that elated Asuna more than she could bring herself to believe. But then the shinobi was joined by the silhouette of a female player and the two proceeded to leave Asuna alone. Blearily opening her eyes, Asuna did her best to ignore pain in her chest that seeing Naruto with another girl, even one without any definite features, and moving on with her caused. I can't think like that. I have to focus, I can't let them see me like this, Asuna told herself, Naruto's smiling face appearing promptly in her mind. I don't want to look so weak in front of them again. She finished, knowing that she had already shown them herself, nearly breaking down into tears. Never again, she silently promised herself. Asuna wasn't giving any more time to think about what she was going to do, because at that moment some large object crashed through her window, flew over her, and landed at the foot of her bed. Absently she noticed that someone was screaming. With wide eyes, Asuna frantically reached for her rapier, only to remember a second later that the trusted rapier that she had kept at her side since she received it days earlier had now been destroyed. No, Asuna thought, turning her attention back to whatever crashed into her room. It took her a couple of seconds as she came down from her slightly panicked state, but she was eventually able to make out what the object was, or more precisely who they were. Naruto. Kirito. Asuna asked, shocked that her two friends had been the ones who came through the window. How? She continued, not quite being able to voice her confusion. I'm not even going to ask. Kirito said as he shakily stood up while he held his head. Normally it should have been impossible for anyone to break into the room of an inn through the windows since they were considered immortal objects, but Ito figured that Naruto was an exception to that rules considering his circumstances. It was that fastest way here. Naruto said unashamedly. Whatever, Kirito said quickly, focusing his attention on Asuna. Asuna, hurry. Materialize all your items. The black-haired swordsman instructed. What? Asuna asked, still not being able to wrap her head around what was going on. We don't have a lot of time left. Kirito continued as he hastily instructed Asuna to bring up her main menu. After many hurried instructions from Kirito, along with quite a few frantic gestures, a new screen popped up in front of Asuna. Completely objectize all items, Asuna read. Yes sir, she continued. Yes of course, Kirito shouted, causing Asuna to press the yes button in pure surprise. Now what is that supposed to do? Asuna asked, only to trail off near the end when things she recognized as hers started to appear out of thin air. Unfortunately for the female player, it wasn't just weapons and potions that were materialized but clothing as well. Which included underwear. What? Asuna thought with a stupefied expression as her face turned a deep shade of red. Neither male player gave much thought about the pile of clothing and other items they were basically diving into as they began to frantically search for something, ignoring the underwear that had fallen on them. A white bra on Kirito that ended on his shoulder and pink panties that landed on Naruto's head. Asuna's horrified and embarrassed expression darkening to one of apoplectic anger with a dark aura forming around her. Naruto stopped moving instantly, being more alert when it came to the feeling associated with a woman's righteous fury, before slowly turning to face Asuna, a fearful look on his face, the panties that had been on his head sliding down the front of his face. I didn't know, Asuna began, her voice barely above a whisper. That you too wished to die so badly, Naruto, Kirito, that you'd want me to kill you. The orange-brown-haired girl finished. Naruto visibly shaking by this point at the feeling that Asuna was giving off. Kirito, Naruto called out to his fellow male player, who was completely oblivious to Asuna as he continued to search through the pile of items, unintentionally putting his hand into the pile. Naruto felt his hand come in contact with a long thin object and hoping that it was what he thought it was. Or at least Asuna would use it to make his death quick and painless. Naruto pulled it out and presented it to Asuna. After a couple of seconds of Asuna not doing anything, Naruto looked WN at what he was holding and immediately felt relieved when he saw that it was Asuna's wind fleuret. At moment the trio could hear the clock tower chiming in the distance as it turned 8 o'clock. How? Asuna asked, taking the rapier from Naruto's hands and holding it close to herself. Good, Kirito said with a sigh of relief, quickly throwing the bra that had landed on his shoulder onto he pile once he finally noticed it, with his face heating up. We just made it. Do you mind telling us what's going on now? Naruto asked Kirito, wanting to keep Asuna's focus as far away as possible from everything that was in the pile of items that she had materialized. Asuna nodded her head in agreement. How did you get my wind fleuret back? I thought it was gone. The hazel-eyed gamer asked, still holding the weapon close to her. Right, Kirito replied as he took a seat at the table that was in the room, as Naruto took the other seat and Asuna sat on her bed. Well, first of all we should be grateful that Naruto was suspicious of Neja. Kirito began before going on to explain how they shadowed Neja for a while, called in Argo to do a little research on similar cases, and finally how Kirito explained how he remembered the completely objectize all items options from his time playing the beta version of the game. It's hard to get to, so not many people know about it. In case an item or weapon is accidentally dropped, misplaced, or lost, Kirito explained, since we knew Asuna's wind fleuret had been switched with a fake, she could use the completely objectize all items to get it back. Though there is also a time limit before the item is lost completely. For equipped weapons it's usually an hour, which is why we had to hurry back. The beater finished, gesturing to the window, which at some point during his explanation had repaired itself. Well, whatever the reason, Asuna began. Thank you, both of you. She continued, holding the wind fleuret in a cherishing embrace. Both Boys smiled happy at the fact that their friend already seemed to be doing a lot better than she had been several minutes ago, though Kirito's smile soon faded away at a fact he knew would happen. I'm glad everything worked out, Asuna. Kirito said earnestly. But eventually you will need to get a new rapier. Even if it's maxed out after the next couple of floors, it will become a liability. He finished regretfully, the feeling only increasing when he saw the sad look cross Asuna's face. Asuna ran her hand gently down the length of her sheathed weapon. She knew that Kirito was just being honest. And with his experience as a beta tester, his words were probably true, so Asuna couldn't begrudge him for his honesty, but that didn't change the impact that knowledge had on her. Naruto was just about ready to hit Kirito for his words. As well-meaning as they might have been, when he stopped as Asuna started to talk. From the moment I first held this, when I first saw it, I was sure I would be using the wind fleuret till the very end. Asuna admitted freely with a fond smile on her face as she gazed down at the weapon resting on her lap. As light as a feather with crystalline beauty, it felt like it held a piece of my soul and was helping me. No matter what you say, I could never just throw it away. The hazel-eyed girl said before switching her gaze to the two male players. I know it might seem ridiculous, but that is how I honestly feel. She finished. It's not at all, Naruto denied, giving the girl a big grin before it changed into a smaller smile, though it didn't lack any of the happiness he really felt. As he took off his headband and looked at the metal plate, running his thumb across the leaf symbol. This headband first belonged to one of my teachers, Uruka-sensei. He gave it to me as proof that he believed in me. He believed that I could be a great shinobi even when I was the dead last of my class. I could have gotten a new one when I graduated, or when the sea Loath was destroyed while I was on a training trip, but I could never just get rid of it like that. It's too important to me. The shinobi stated, putting the headband back on. That's why I replaced the cloth. So that I could keep metal plate and what it meant to me. I know how you feel, Asuna. Naruto told the girl honestly. Asuna smiled brilliantly at Naruto, happy that someone understood how she felt. Kirito considered mentioning the screw in his bike that he had had since his first bike, but ultimately decided not to for something more important. Well, luckily there is something similar in SAO. Kirito told them, drawing their attention as he went on to explain. Sao's weapon creation system begins with melting down a sword to its base and picking a new sword to make from a given selection. Essentially, the soul of the weapon will be transferred to the new one. The swordsman finished. When Asuna didn't say anything after a minute, Kirito assumed that she didn't like his suggestion. Or maybe you'd like to do something else. He added weakly. No, Asuna denied, shaking her head. That's probably what I'll do. The orange-brown-haired player decided. If this sword and its soul could be transferred to another, I'll definitely fight with it till the very end. And I'll make it for you. Naruto declared decisively, drawing confused looks from Asuna and Kirito. Kirito shared a look with Asuna before returning his attention to Naruto. Do you know what you're saying, Naruto? Kirito questioned the blonde shinobi curiously. Naruto nodded his head in response. Of course, Naruto replied. I'd have to become a blacksmith, right? He asked back, getting a nod from Kirito. Then I'll become a blacksmith. The shinobi said obviously. It makes sense with how many swords I break. He added with a shrug of his shoulders. But why offer to make my weapon? Asuna asked him, more than a little curious about Naruto's declaration, though she was still admittedly touched by his offer. Because. Naruto began looking straight at Asuna, the chestnut-haired player being captivated by his eyes. I never want to see you that sad ever again. The shinobi stated. You were so cool and beautiful when we fought Ilfang. No matter what Ilfang threw at you, you didn't flinch even once. That's why I don't want to see you sad, and if making a rapier that you can fight with through all of Ainka Road is what it takes, then I'll make you the best rapier in all Sao. Naruto promised. Asuna teared up a little at Naruto's declaration. Thank you, the hazel-eyed girl whispered out, wiping the small tears away. Okay. Kirito spoke up after taking a few seconds to let the moment pass. So you'll become a blacksmith, but we've had a long day and should really get some sleep now. The black-haired RDS man decided, standing up from his seat. Come on, Naruto. He called, walking out of the room after bidding Asuna good night. Yeah, Naruto muttered, standing up as well. Good night, Asuna. Good night, Naruto, Asuna said to the shinobi. The next few days passed by rather quickly without much preamble. It took Kirito another 2 days before he was able to complete the martial arts quest will. Naruto and Asuna passed their time grinding against any monster that they came across, the shinobi practicing using his newly gained martial arts skills within the game. At times while Kirito was trying to complete his quest, Naruto and Asuna would journey to the closest village or city in order to gather supplies or other materials that they might need. But like any time Naruto found himself walking through a street, he heard whispers from some players, not all but some, in concern to him. Naruto lived with hushed whispers all his life, a few nameless players doing the same thing he had grown up with from an entire village hardly registered in his mind. But when those whispers were directed at Asuna, as well as Kirito whenever the swordsman decided to take a break, Naruto couldn't just ignore them. Slowly his two friends were being ostracized by the other players for simply being seen with him, and the blonde shinobi realized, forlornly, to keep them from being distrusted and shunned by the other players trapped within Sao, he would have to split up from the others. With his chakra and skills as a shinobi, Naruto would be fine no matter what was thrown at him while in the game. The same could not be said about Kirito and Asuna. Naruto couldn't be with all the time, and at times they would need the help and trust of other players, especially during raids on the boss room. That's why Naruto came to the decision he had. Sorry guys, Naruto whispered, having snuck out of the inn in the middle of the night several nights after recovering Asuna's wind florette, looking back at the inn with a sorrowful look in his eyes. It's not like the shinobi planned on avoiding Asuna and Kirito, but at the moment it was best if they went their separate ways. At least for now and until Naruto could change people's opinion of himself. He did it once before, there isn't any reason he wouldn't be able to do it again. With a deep sigh, Naruto turned his back on the inn and began to walk away, planning to head out to the fields. Asuna was woken the next morning by the chimes of bells going off nearby. Looking around with her eyes half-lidded and her rapier clutched to her body, Ving been too afraid even as she slept to let go of her weapon, as she looked around for the source when she spotted it nearby. A message, Asuna muttered groggily, from Naruto. She continued to read her sleep-addled mind, confused as to why Naruto would be sending her a message when he was only a few rooms away. A part of Asuna's mind told her that she should be thankful that the blonde shinobi didn't just barge into her room like he did the other night. After debating for a second if she should read the message or go back to sleep, the orange-brown-haired girl opened the message and began to read it. Asuna, by the time you're reading this I'll be gone. The message read, drawing an immediate gasp from Asuna and causing her to sit up in her bed, finally releasing her hold on her rapier. Without much of a second thought, even to the fact that she was only wearing her night clothes of a tank top and shorts, Asuna rushed out of her room towards Naruto's. After a couple of quick knocks, Una opened the without waiting for an answer and almost ran into Kirito in the process. Kirito! Asuna nearly shouted out in surprise before looking around frantically for Naruto but not being able to spot him. Where's Naruto? He's not. He didn't. The female player asked, only becoming more frantic once she realized that Naruto wasn't there. Hey, calm down Asuna, Kirito said, holding up his NDS in an effort to pacify the anxious hazel-eyed rapier user. Naruto's already left, he said, stepping to the side to allow Asuna an unrestricted view of the empty room. Looks like he left at some point in the middle of the night while we were all asleep. He commented, shifting his gaze from the room back to Asuna. Left, Asuna repeated, the only word that really registered in her mind. Then, he didn't, she began to question only to trail off at the end, unwilling to actually voice her question and risk it becoming reality. It took a couple of seconds for Kirito to understand what Asuna was asking before his eyes widened, nearly popping out of his head. No, Kirito denied loudly while shaking his hands in front of him frantically in denial. He just snuck out in the middle of the night. He promised. If Naruto had done that, which he wouldn't, you know that, his body would still be here. Kirito pointed out. While Asuna didn't care about the little piece of fact that Kirito pointed out at the end, it did help to relieve some of the nervousness she was feeling. Thank goodness, Asuna breathed. Kirito stares at the girl for a few silent moments before finally speaking up. You're worried, He pointed out obviously with an almost amused smile on his face. You should finish reading Naruto's message, Kirito advised. It was kind of obvious that Asuna hadn't finished reading Naruto's message before rushing towards his room to check on him, otherwise she would have known that he had left and not killed himself like she initially thought. The only reason that Kirito had been in Naruto's room to begin with was because he wanted to make sure for himself. Asuna nodded her head once in agreement, taking one last look around before heading back to her own room. Sitting back on her bed, unconsciously taking a hold of her rapier, Asuna continued reading Naruto's message. You don't have to worry, I'll be fine and definitely keep my promise to you and make you the best rapier possible. That part caused Asuna to smile a little. You idiot, Asuna muttered softly to herself. But I had to leave. Naruto insisted in his message. The other players would eventually turn their backs on you if Kirito and you were kept being seen with me, and I didn't want that to happen. The two of you are strong, and will only get stronger, but not by yourselves, you'll need the support of others. You won't get that support if you're ostracized because of me. I told you Jinchuriki is the power of human sacrifice, someone who is hated by others. But I won't allow my friends, or anyone I care about, go through what I've gone through. I am willing to be seen as a Jinchuriki again for the sake of everyone, so that they could set their differences aside and focus on beating the game. So I'll fight on my own for now until I can earn everyone's trust. I've done it before, and if I ever need help I know I can count on you and Kirito to have my back. So until then, see ya. With those final words, Naruto's message came to an end. Asuna sat silently in her room contemplating what Naruto said in his message until a knock on her door drew her attention. Asuna, can I come in? Kirito asked from the other side of the door. Getting a come in from the girl inside. Walking into the room, the black-haired swordsman found Asuna sitting on her bed holding her rapier, but unlike before, Kirito somehow doubted that she was doing it consciously, as she seemed almost deep in thought. So did you finish reading Naruto's message? He asked her, which was answered with a nod. And what did you think? Asuna let out a huff as she set her rapier down beside her and crossed her arms in front of her. It's absolutely ridiculous, the orange-brown-haired player stated decisively. Naruto's putting himself in danger for something so absurd. He's our friend, why would we let what some people say or think affect that? Asuna asked rhetorically. You make a good point. Kirito conceded, agreeing fully with Asuna's opinion. Assuming that whatever Naruto told Asuna in his message was similar to what his message said. But it was Naruto's decision, and really we should have guessed that this was something he would have done. The swordsman finished almost casually with his observation. What do you mean? Asuna asked with a confused expression on her face. Well, Kirito began thoughtfully, his hand held against his chin. From what Naruto told us about himself, he's the type of person to take on the problems of others without a second thought. The sword user reasoned. At the same time, when it comes to his own problems, Naruto probably tries to solve them on his own so he doesn't feel like he is burdening others. Kirito stated. That's probably part of the reason that he decided to leave the way he did. Asuna looked down at the floor. It's stupid. The hazel-eyed girl muttered quietly to herself. An uncomfortable look appeared on Kirito's face as he barely managed to hear what Asuna said in regards to Naruto's choice. Maybe, Kirito said carefully. But I kind of agree with him. What? Asuna gasped out, shocked. Kirito let out a sigh as he steeled himself about what he was about to say next. I'm kind of in the same boat as Naruto. Kirito reminded her. I revealed that I was a beater, someone who was a beta tester and used the information I gathered to cheat in order to get ahead of everyone else. So the opinion of the other players about me is a little better than theirs about Naruto. So it might be best if we went our separate ways as well. I see, Asuna said softly. The black-haired swordsman gave Asuna a small sad smile. He understood how the girl must be feeling, losing the two people that had been with her the last few days and that she had grown to trust in such short amount of time. You'll definitely become strong in the future. Kirito stated obviously. It was fact that he was certain of after the last few days of knowing the chestnut-haired girl. Naruto said something similar. Asuna remarked almost offhandedly. Kirito smiled a bit brighter at Asuna after that. Then you should definitely believe it. He urged his female friend. But as strong as you get, there is only so much that you'll be able to do on your own. Kirito continued. So when someone you trust asks you to join a guild, don't turn them down. The swordsman finished. What about you and Naruto? Asuna asked. With his abilities, the last thing you really need to do is worry about Naruto. Kirito advised. It doesn't matter how strong he is. Asuna refuted with a shake of her head. Naruto could still be hurt. As far as Asuna was concerned, Naruto's life was possibly in the greatest danger out of anyone, since one strike from a monster in the wrong place could be the end of him. Have more faith in Naruto. Kirito said, trying to placate the rapier user. Besides, if he needs help, he has us to bail him out. We'll both keep an eye out for him, he stated, bringing up the menu screen to disband the party. Later, Asuna, the beater, finished as he walked out of the room. Bye, Asuna called after Kirito, only noticing after the sword user left that there was a semi-transparent screen in front of her. A friend request from Naruto, below it 2 buttons, a blue button with a white circle, the other a red button with a white X. There really only one response. Ellipsis. Naruto was taking a short break under a tree as he stared out at open field, keeping a close eye on the monsters when the chiming of bells drew his attention. Turning his head ever so slightly, Naruto saw a small window with the announcement that Asuna had accepted his friend request, and next to it a message from the orange-brown-haired girl. With more than a little trepidation, Naruto opened the message and read what was inside. Baka, stay safe. It was short, and to the point, and it still managed to cause a fox-like smile to spread across Naruto's face. All right. Naruto said out loud rather cheerfully. As he stood up and wiped away non-existent dust from himself, breaks over time to get back to work. The blonde shinobi declared before bringing his hands up in a familiar hand seal, Shadow Clone Jutsu. And with that, a clone popped into existence next to Naruto, drawing the attention of all the nearby monsters and spawning a countless number more around them. With determination burning in his eyes, Naruto charged at the horde, a sword drawn. While there might not be much of a point in him leveling up, seeing as he was probably already the strongest player within the game, Naruto still had to gather materials and items. Besides, just going out and killing monsters was kind of fun. This was supposed to be a game after all. Naruto sidestepped from a charging trembling cow before bringing down his sword in 3 quick slashes. Looking around, the shinobi ignored the defeated monster in favor of the ones that surrounded him. The monsters were a mixture of trembling cows and wind wasps, with more appearing every few seconds because of the clones he had at his side. The clones were wilting away at the monster's HP, leaving them with as little as possible before moving on to the next opponent. Naruto discovered earlier that should a clone be the one to defeat a monster, he would not receive any of the experience nor any of the call or items that the monster might have dropped once they were destroyed. The shinobi jumped over a wind wasp that had dived at him from behind. Spinning around, the blonde player used his sword to bisect the wasp while in midair, landing in a crouch. The fragments of the destroyed monster fell over him before he shot forward, gathering chakra into the palm of his hand. Rasengan. The newly created ball of chakra slammed into a trembling cow, destroying it almost instantly and allowing Naruto to continue charging, taking 2 more out before finally coming to a stop. Reacting on instinct, Naruto spun around his sword, ready to cut through a charging trembling cow that had managed to get close only for it to be completely unnecessary. With a distinctively female shout, a figure fell from above, impaling the monster and destroying it at the same time, the monster shattering to pieces by the time the person landed on the ground. Naruto would have questioned who the individual was if he hadn't recognized the long orange-brown hair, which had captivated Naruto since the first time he saw it, that had flown behind the girl as she landed. Hey Asu, whoa! Naruto shouted, initially walking towards the female player only to almost immediately retreat as Asuna rushed at him. The few pixels of the destroyed monster acting as a backdrop for her rapier poised to strike. Asuna fixed the shinobi with a glare, unwavering even as she held her rapier to the side of Naruto's throat. And just stared into his eyes for a moment before finally saying something. Those who break the rules are trash. The hazel-eye girl uttered lowly. But those who abandon air friends and comrades are worse than trash. She finished the phrase Naruto knew by heart. You were the one who said that to me and Kirito. Asuna stated, her voice breaking slightly near the end. But this is the second time that you left on your own. She finished almost accusingly, the stronghold she had on her rapier causing it to shake slightly, as she slowly removed it from Naruto's throat and let her arm fall to her side. Naruto stared at Asuna regretfully. The young woman who without the smallest traces of hesitation rushed a monster that intended to end her life, who fought with grace and speed of a seasoned fighter, making it look like she was almost dancing around her opponent at times. Yet at that moment he watched her falter, watched her waver because of him. When Asuna thought she lost her rapier, the hazel-eyed girl nearly broke down, and Naruto found himself hating Neja faster than nearly anyone else he had met in his life. Which is why Naruto was so happy with what he had planned for the blacksmith. Pranksters, after all, could be very vindictive. But being the cause of Asuna's anguish, regardless of how major or minor it might be, was 1,000 times worse and was tearing at the shinobi. It doesn't matter to you if you don't know someone. If there's a chance you can help them or keep them from getting hurt, you'll do whatever you can. Asuna started Aga, in stating a fact that she was completely sure about despite knowing Naruto for only a short amount of time. So why won't you let others do the same for you? She asked, though even as she was asking her question, Asuna got a faint idea of the reason why. The Fourth Great Shinobi War. Naruto had only mentioned it briefly as he revealed his past to her and Kirito. But even with the little that Naruto talked about it, Asuna understood how horrible it must have been for him. To have friends and comrades die in front of him and for his sake. It stood to reason no matter how the war ended that it would have left Naruto with a sense of guilt and a desire to never have anyone else die for his sake. Jinchuriki, Asuna began softly, capturing Naruto's attention completely at the mention of the word, the power of the human sacrifice. She muttered, "The one who bears the hatred of the world." The chestnut-haired girl continued repeating his words from when they had defeated the first floor boss as she looked at him straight in the eyes. Her hazel ones meeting his cerulean blue. Naruto almost looked away after a second. He had come to terms with being a Jinchuriki and was now proud of it, but there were some scars from his childhood that still hadn't healed, and new ones made with the Fourth Great Shinobi War. Asuna kept that from happening by placing her hand against one of his cheeks to make sure he didn't break eye contact with her. "But that's not all you are," Asuna said definitely. "Wah?" Naruto swallowed, about to voice his confusion, only to be silenced by Asuna before he could fully form the question. "You are Naruto Uzumaki," Asuna stated confidently. "I'm sure that's who your friends fought for. Who they believed in. Your status as Jinchuriki comes second to who you are. You inspire people. You inspired me and Kirito and gave everyone else a goal to focus on. I believe in you, Naruto, and want to fight beside you no matter what anyone says because you are my friend," the hazel-eyed girl told him earnestly. "But," Naruto tried to protest, but Asuna stopped him. "If you are strong enough to face this on your own, then I want to become strong enough to help you shoulder that burden. So whether you like it or not, I will support you no matter what anyone else might say," Asuna claimed strongly. Naruto stared at the girl once more in awe of her, of the compassion she possessed. Touched by her concern for him and willingness to stand by his side. But staring into Asuna's eyes, Naruto could see something else in them as well. After a few seconds of simply staring at her, Naruto suddenly found himself laughing. Something that not only confused Asuna but also managed to anger her, believing that Naruto was laughing at her in her declaration. Seeing Asuna's rising tempi, Naruto held up his hands in order to placate her before she could lash out at him, while he also getting his laughter under control. "Thank you, Asuna," Naruto said warmly. "Huh," Asuna murmured in slight confusion and with a light blush on her cheeks because of the smile that Naruto was giving her. "Thank you," Naruto repeated himself, still smiling warmly at the chestnut-haired girl. "You're I don't have to take everything on by myself. With everything that's happened, being taken from my home and friends and being trapped inside Sao, different from everyone else, I forgot something important. No matter how powerful you become, never try to shoulder everything alone. Otherwise you will undoubtedly fail. Someone told me those important words and I forgot them because I thought I could save everyone on my own just because I was stronger than anyone else here. I convinced myself that I could do anything even if I was alone. But that was wrong," Naruto told her with a shake of her head. "I wasn't alone, and there were already 2 people I could depend on, 2 people that were already my friends and comrades. Kirito and you, Asuna. So thank you, I won't forget that again," Naruto all but promised. In Asuna's eyes Naruto had seen determination and a resolve, not to mention stubbornness, that he had only ever seen in his own eyes. It was at that moment that Naruto knew that, no matter what he did, Asuna would never let him act on his own. Would never abandon him. Good, Asuna said, letting out a relieved sigh, finally regaining the composure that she had lost since first arriving. Then would you like to party with me for a little while longer? She asked with a smile now on her face. Naruto nodded in response but could not voice his agreement before one of his clones cut into their conversation. Hey boss. A clone called out to the blonde shinobi. Are you two done talking now? It asked. Since they first started talking with one another, the two players tore the attention away from one another to focus on their surroundings and the reason the shadow clone intruded into their conversation. Encircling them was a small horde of monsters that the clones that Naruto had made earlier were keeping at bay in order for Naruto and Asuna to have their heart-to-heart. Asuna looked around in slight concern. She knew that Naruto was strong, if his clones kept this any monsters from bothering them while they had been talking, then Naruto could obviously take them all on as well, but she was still a little worried. Before Asuna's concerns could grow any bigger, a screen popped up in front of her. Naruto invites you to join his party. It was a party invitation from Naruto. Do you trust me, Asuna? Naruto asked, standing up and holding his hand out to the hazel-eyed girl. Asuna stared at Naruto's hand for only a second before a small smile appeared on her face. Asuna whispered in confirmation, accepting the invitation before taking Naruto's hand and letting him pull her up. Then let's go. Naruto said, a confident grin spreading across his face. The confidence that Naruto was exuding seemed to be infectious as Asuna could feel her own confidence being bolstered as she stood next to Naruto, crushing any doubt that she had been feeling. Right, Asuna replied, her rapier at the ready. Naruto dismissed his clones before the pair burst forward. Naruto, naturally the faster of the pair, took the lead. A few quick strikes from Naruto stunned the closet's monsters, a few trembling cows and trembling oxen, before letting Asuna finish them off with a few quick strikes of her rapier. Naruto rushed at another trembling ox before using its head as a stepping stone to jump high into the air, causing the airborne monsters to suddenly start to swarm the blonde. Sheathing his sword, Naruto drew a few shuriken and threw them at the monsters, striking a number of wind wasps. A large insect charged at Naruto, dodging the shuriken that the shinobi had thrown. It was larger than the average wind wasp, Naruto being able to identify it as a storm hornet, a slightly stronger monster compared to the average wind wasp. Redrawing his sword, the shinobi blocked he storm hornet's stinger before using one of his practiced martial arts skills to land a devastating blow the storm hornet's middle. Asuna quickly did away with the monsters that Naruto had left at her mercy before moving on. A trembling ox tried to blindside her, but the orange-brown-haired girl sidestepped the charge, striking it a few times before finishing it with a single linear spinning Aru. Asuna let a trembling cow approach her as she charged up another sword skill and releasing it the moment the monster was close enough. Movement from her left drew Asuna's attention before a brief look of disgust crossed her face as a monster bearing the name Jagged Worm slowly made its way towards her. But much to Asuna's small relief, she didn't have to destroy the monster herself as Naruto fell from above, bisecting the jagged worm in half before it shattered to pieces. For a brief moment Naruto and Asuna stood back to back, smiles on each other's faces as they looked at the other out of the corner of their eyes. A silent exchange being shared between the two, and then shot off to re-engage the encircling monsters. The two worked almost flawlessly together, more than a match for any normal monster on their own, but completely invincible when they worked alongside one another, destroying a number of monsters in a matter of seconds. In the end, the small horde of monsters was all destroyed in a matter of a couple of minutes. The final monster being struck down by both Naruto and Asuna as they ran at the final trembling ox, their respective weapon piercing the monster's skull and proceeding to tear down its side. Turning to Asuna, as the trembling ox shattered behind them, Naruto once more gazed the hazel-eyed girl with another sincere smile. Thanks, Asuna. Naruto thanked the female player once more. For setting me straight and knocking some sense into me. Asuna looked bashful for a second with a smile on her face, cheeks red, and briefly unable to make eye contact with Naruto. Because of the heartfelt sense of gratitude Naruto was expressing towards her. You're welcome. Asuna replied gently before a playful look appeared in her eyes as she stared into Naruto's cerulean blue. But next time you do something stupid like leaving, I'll really will have to knock some sense into you. She teased him cheerfully, though Naruto wondered if she was teasing him at all or really meant it. Got it, Naruto said with a light chuckle, happy that the chestnut-haired girl was in a far better mood than the one she was in when she first arrived. No matter what happened, Naruto wanted to make sure that Asuna was always happy. It was the least she deserved. Thank you, Asuna, Naruto thought silently, gazing fondly at the girl. Thank you for becoming someone precious to me. For being my friend. That's it for today. I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to check out author of this story. Details in description.